Estuary 2025, August 22nd through the 24th, in Elmhurst, Illinois. A weekend you won't want to miss, with special guests Cale Zeldin, Paul Vanderklay, Rod Dreher, Elizabeth Oldfield, John Vervaeke, and Jonathan Peugeot. Midwestuary 2025, the Fellowship of the Spirit. Stay tuned for more details. Visit us at midwestuary.com for ongoing updates.
Ooh, yeah. Can you feel it? That sweet, sweet revelation. The truth is served, take a sip. Ooh, it's a holy sensation. Sip the Kool-Aid, baby. Pass the cup, don't say maybe. Once you're in, you're never out. Say amen, scream and shout. Sip the Kool-Aid, baby. Pass the cup, don't say maybe. That's a baby. Once you're in, you're never out. Say amen, scream and shout. Now don't you question, just obey. Groove with us and fade away.
In other news, Ron Copperman was arrested last night after attempting to reveal secret sacred truths of the TLC to an unknown sociologist.
Hold on a second. It's the cops.
Oh no!
Ron Copperman, minister. I set the alarm off. Oh my God, dude.
What's your name, sir?
Ron Copperman. Yeah.
18A.
TLC authorities have indicated that the Copper Man is being held at an undisclosed facility until he repents of his false prophecy. Back to you, Tim.
I'm gonna tell you a little story about me and my friends, about something we did way back when. I was eating spaghetti and getting kind of sweaty when all of a sudden in walked Betty. Betty was my girl in these old days, and she had a lot of friends that were walking my way. I said first there was Helen, then there was Ellen, but the best of them all, she had the name of Llewellyn. She had the gleamiest eyes and the prettiest pose. But get this, Paul, she had some bony elbows. But back to the point. The point was this. Betty was jealous of my friend Sis. Sis at 7, Liz at 8. I thought that plan would work, but it didn't work great. But take Fred's advice and never try that. It probably won't work and you might get slapped.
Slapped.
Yeah.
That's my favorite of your raps, Fred.
Here it is. Soda. Gotta have it. One love, baby.
Freddie's drug. All right, here we go.
Ready.
All right.
One
One
love.
All right.
52.
52 in the can.
Ken knew Happy, though. Great Ken knew Happy, and I can rejoice about that.
Although this world will devastate you, and rejoice although this world will penetrate you, and rejoice although you will not survive. Rejoice you'll never make it out alive.
Excellent rehearsal, gentlemen.
And rejoice Your hair, it smells like burning hair. Oh, rejoice. Your nails all got chewed off. Oh, rejoice. And holy fuck, you're bleeding there. Oh, rejoice. You burn your whole beard off. Rejoice despite the fact this world will hurt you. And rejoice despite the fact this world will kill you. And rejoice despite the fact this world will tear you to shreds. Rejoice because you're trying your best.
Hey, I love that one. That's gorgeous. Thank you, brother. Who's that brother?
All right, good morning. And had the Midwest Estuary commercial right at the top. Midwest Estuary tickets are selling. Rumor is about 100 more tickets, and the conference gets to the break-even point, but there's more tickets after that. I'm encouraged by that. I was talking to some of the organizers, and they were saying that pretty much all the tickets have sort of come through my channel so far. Vervaeke and Peugeot, who have larger channels and followings than I do, haven't really gotten into the promotion of the conference yet. It's still a few months off, so late August in Chicago. I just bought my tickets. I just signed the contract. So that's coming up. And what we're going to do this morning is what we do Friday mornings. Not all of our people are here yet. Well, hopefully they come in. And well, let's begin. We've got Mark D. Parker. He's in the house, but let's start with Jason because Jason's completely new. Good morning, Jason.
Good morning. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Doing all right.
I don't know if I've ever seen you on a live stream before. Have you been on one yet?
I have not. No.
Okay, so this is the first time. Well, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm about as Dutch as you are.
Well, you've got the last name Yonker, and I can imagine how it gets butchered.
You know how to pronounce it, so that's awesome. Yeah, I grew up in Granville, Michigan, and went to South Granville Christian Reformed Church. I went to Granville Christian School, Calvin High School. I lost my camera there. Can I change the settings to get that back, or?
Go for it.
Let me see here. Too many things. Yeah, church twice on Sunday, and I'm not seeing how I get the.
If you go down,
change my camera.
If you look at settings,
oh, there we go.
Click that, then you can look at the video feed, and then
Gotcha.
Let's
go back to my regular camera. Yeah, I even did a stint at Calvin College.
Oh, okay.
But I live out in Phoenix, Arizona now, and yeah, I've been out here since '93.
Okay. Do you know Rod Hugan?
I do not. No.
Oh my. Well, Rod is a church planter. He planted the Village Church in Tucson, and I know that he moved to Phoenix when his father had emphysema, and he moved to Phoenix when his father was ill. His whole family moved, and so he grew up in Phoenix. But I think he got out of Phoenix at some point. So yeah, you should meet Rod at some point. He's been on the channel. He's a great guy. So, how did you find me? This little corner. How did that happen?
I think it was the Jordan Peterson pipeline.
Okay.
And obviously when I saw like there's a CRC pastor talking about this and then the the similarities just kept, I have a Frisian grandmother, and I think you speak Spanish because of your work. I speak Spanish because of your work. I think I saw at some point you've got some relatives in Granville, Michigan, and
oh yeah, my wife's relatives.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you have a lack of neuroticism that I don't, and I just enjoy soaking up your ability to just kind of think people have different feelings about things, and it doesn't bother me at all. And your openness to experience and so on. I listen pretty regularly.
Okay, well, let's see. Raymond says, I was looking forward to speaking to you today, but got a call. Child isn't feeling well, have to bow out. So we're not going to have Raymond Geist on here. So Daniel Dreistraw. We got another Dutch name, another Frisian name. Oh my goodness. And where's Ron Vanderwell? Ron's been wanting to do this. I hope he didn't back out too. Hang on. Paul, looking forward to Estuary today. Remind me again, how do you bring me in? Oh boy. Click on the link, Ron. Maybe I'll drop the link there in the poor Ron. Someone else. Did you know Ron Vanderwell growing up?
That doesn't sound familiar.
His father pastored churches in that area, and you're probably close to our age. So, oh boy, look at just all falling apart. Well, hopefully I'll bring in this fella and we'll save the stream. This veteran of the corner, the one of the two. I don't know what is your title in the House of Woo, Mark? Uh-oh. You have to unmute. No boomer jokes about technology, please.
Hey, it happens to Grizz. It happens to everybody.
That's true.
It happens to McMo. He's a millennial.
Yeah. And a tech guy did tech things for his church.
So yeah, it does happen. I apologize, but no, it's there's no title. I don't think we're evangelical. We're nearly Anabaptist. So,
Brother Mark, and Brother Ron. So,
but we are also woke enough to be they them. So,
Oh man.
Well, I'm only here selfishly because you're cheaper than therapy. So I'm here just I'm here for the sanity. So, or the insanity.
Well, let's see. We've got Daniel.
I'm so happy to be with so many Dutchmen. I did not expect my background to suit the situation so well.
You're back. Do you have a Dutch background, Mark?
No, I mean my virtual background.
Oh, your virtual background. Oh yeah, the Dutch with the you put me into
a Dutch village.
Me back into a Dutch village. So I'm hoping. Let's see, Ron. When did you? Oh, Ron, come on. We need you, Ron. Coming. All right. Well, maybe a little bit more background on you, Jason. So we'll sort of rando you right now. So you found me through the Peterson pipeline. Are you a churchgoer or not a churchgoer?
Yes, I'm a member of the Wisconsin Evangelical Lutheran Synod.
Oh, Wisconsin Evangelical Lutheran Synod. Oh, tell me a little bit about that.
So it's a very, very conservative Lutheran church. Mostly they do kind of high church liturgical stuff, but our particular local church is more seeker friendly, and we've got drums and guitars and so on. But I'm the member of the chairperson for the mental health committee for our church, and then I do a recovery ministry as well.
Oh, so not only do we have Dutch last names, but we got some recovery stuff going here, which is another big corner. Because I noticed in your email address you have a domain, and you want to tell us about Crosswalk Phoenix. What's that?
So that's the name of the church that we attend.
Okay,
and that my ministry is sort of it's a ministry of that church.
Okay. It's interesting. So it's part of because Missouri Synod Lutheran is quite well known. Wisconsin, less known, although there are many, many Lutherans in Wisconsin, Minnesota. That whole area of the country was just populated by German immigrants.
It's near Grand Rapids.
It's near Grand. Oh, interesting.
It's their Grand Rapids.
It's their Grand Rapids.
Yeah.
So what city in Wisconsin is their Grand Rapids?
Milwaukee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. And how did you wind up with them?
So I was a wayward youth and wandered around and wandered around. And when I was making my way back to Christianity, I was doing it with a wife who was lapsed Catholic and of Mexican extraction. And we were just going around looking for any church service that would be bilingual and something that wasn't incredibly progressive. And we found one, and I got confirmed in the church. And then when we moved, ended up moving to the one that was closest to us.
Wow. Fascinating. Now, you, like me and like Mark, we all live in sunny climates. I always have to wear a hat. I'm sure that's the same. Phoenix is even worse.
I wear a house.
Oh, you wear a house?
Yes.
All right. Finally, another Dutchman, because that's what we needed. Another CRC guy. Ron Vanderwell, what can you tell us about Granville, Michigan?
We finally caught up with summer. So we don't have earthquakes or forest fires or even rock slides in the mountains, but we do occasionally have really dramatic thunderstorms. And so
Yeah, I heard you had a good one last night.
we did. Sitting on the porch watching the pyrotechnics was really cool. And I think it's just good to be in environments that remind us that we're not the top of the food chain.
So Jason Yonker, which of course is a name that Ron can pronounce, grew up in Granville. Jason, when were you growing up in Granville area?
So I was born in 1970.
Oh, you're younger than me. You're younger than Ron and I.
My house is right on the corner of Pineview and Wilson Avenue in Granville. It's a brick house that you probably right by the Christian school. I walked to that Christian school every morning.
All right. And Ron, you grew up, when I randoed you, you were in Jenison, Hudsonville, Jenison, Hudsonville, and Granville. I mean, it's practically the same Dutch muck farm metroplex back, 50 years ago. Yeah. So, all right. Well, Dan, we got another guy, another Drystra who is coming. So Mark, you're going to be our diversity hire today in this live stream. Mark D. Parker is our diversity hire. How's that make you feel, Mark?
Probably like any diversity hire does.
Well, I don't suit the color. I guess I don't know what diversity do I bring? Neurodiversity. So there you go.
You bring neurodiversity. You didn't grow up CRC.
No, I'm clueless. All you guys are talking all about this inside baseball. I'm not getting any of it. I'm like this, and you're all shocked that they don't. I mean, that he doesn't know this person. I mean,
Dutch bingo. Yeah.
Yeah. I launched right into Dutch bingo right in front of you, Mark. It's a terrible, terrible thing to do. But
what I admired was your expectation that it would actually that he would know this person, and then it's like you're disappointed when it doesn't happen. It's just like,
we are. That's because we get bingo often in the CRC. So a mutual friend of Ron and I, Dave Lindner, when he went to Calvin College, he didn't grow up Dutch or CRC or any of that. He went to Calvin College, and he's in a class, and he learns that he's talking to someone sitting next to him, and the person just casually said, "Oh yeah, my cousin's right over there," and he's like, "Your cousin's here?" and he starts making this, "Oh, your cousin's here," and everybody in the class is like, "We're probably half of us are cousins here in this class." It's that way in the CRC, and it's especially that way in West Michigan CRC. So that's why when Jason talked about Phoenix, I had to ask about Rod Hugan. But the CRC has had a diaspora experience over the last little while, and so
impressive.
Now Daniel, hopefully he'll come, and hopefully because he's got a Frisian last name, he'll fit in and not just be stubborn along with the rest of those of us with Frisian blood. And of course, I've completely killed the stream because most of the people coming in are like what are they talking about with these Dutch last names and the Frisians and, you know, a cross street in Granville, Michigan, and a brick house that he reasonably expects myself and Ron to recognize. Yeah, it's that bad. But I think I'm gonna reshuffle the Hollywood squares a little bit, and because Jason is new. Yesterday, I just did a live stream with somebody out of the UK, a friend of Poe the Person, who has this really interesting gamified conversation thing. So when that comes out, I think some people in the corner are going to be really interested in it, because just the sort of the way, the format that he pursued the conversation, it was really quite fun. But what we do here at Estuary is we construct a conversation from who knows what, and then we have the conversation. And the construction of the conversation begins with introductions. And then each of us pitches an idea to the group. And the pitch can be anything, something that you've been thinking about intellectually, an idea or something. It can be something contextual. It can have to do with Granville, Michigan, or the fact that you can no longer find muck farms in Hudsonville. This is a terrible ecological tragedy that the world is deeply unfamiliar with.
How do you teach young people the value of work?
I know. That's why the CRC has fallen.
Yeah.
Because
how
there
else
were
do
no
you spend
muck
time
farms.
with your cousins?
There were no muck farms anymore. So it can be intellectual, it can be contextual, it can be personal. You might come on here and tell us about your secret sacred self, or you might confess your sins here on StreamYard instead of Zoom. Or it can be something estuarial, something that has to do with Estuary or the Estuary Protocol or the gathering of this particular group. And you take this idea that you have and you place it on a virtual table in our midst. You have to listen carefully. Now, it's not too hard with this group because we only got 4 right now. But after that, we're going to go around the circle again, and you have to point to somebody else's idea, and you have to tell them what about their idea sort of triggered you. Now, seeing as we only have Ray, oh, we miss you, man. We really miss you. Yeah, and Ray has his time with the Ron was with me on my trip to Redeemer Press in New York City, and Ray had been to Redeemer Press. Ron, have you been watching all my videos for the last 3 weeks?
No.
Well, there we have it.
We have a new granddaughter, and so I've been preoccupied.
Well, that's an awesome reason. I will anybody that uses a grandchild as an excuse, I will grant it. Just by having a grandchild, you win. So then we point to the ideas that's on the table, and we start the conversation, and hopefully Daniel can fit right in when he gets here. I'll keep my eye on my email just in case he has difficulty getting in, but who knows how. So I probably won't be able to pass this first round in terms of pitching, so I'll have to do a little bit of thinking myself, but I've always got stuff going on in my head. But Mark D. Parker, you being an Estuary veteran, I'm going to give you first chance at pitching something to the group.
Well, part of me wants to talk about your video today. Just continue that conversation. That's very interesting.
Well, you better tell people what my video today was, because Ron clearly didn't watch it.
Some of the naive materialism behind what would you say, the reaction to the prospect of AI is so much. It's still an imagined future that has people very worked up, and they're spinning off into fantasies of utopia or dystopia. And the people who are trapped in materialism are the ones who are particularly caught up. And it was funny that Douthat kind of side shuffled his opportunity to introduce Jesus into the conversation, and you caught that. So it's all very interesting, and I'm not despairing, and I'm not necessarily utopic about it, but I think that'd be good. But then there's always the shit show that is my church life locally, and we could talk about that. and it drove me to do a deep study of evangelicalism, my form of evangelicalism in America, which is actually quite interesting. So we could talk about that, but I'm actually more interested in playing Dutch bingo with the boys and see where we go.
It's a very shallow game,
well, and I'm really
unless you can really play.
I'm really interested in what's brought down the lack of muck, or the muck shortage that has brought down the CRC, which makes me wonder then, is it a dearth of teats to milk that has reduced the CRC? I mean, you're just, the whole Dutch experience revolves around
muck and cows. That's pretty much it.
Pretty much the name of our high school sports teams.
Wow, Mark, you are a good guy to have in an estuary. You didn't pitch one idea, you pitched three. Right. So I love it. Now I have I have the inbreeding. The Phlebas says that he has the requisite inbreeding to hop on for the bingo. Now I have dropped the link. I haven't pinned it, but if there's two people that want to come in from the hive mind to join in this estuary, I think
that'd be awesome. Peter
Penbrook Rose was interested. He's the one who said drop the link, so hopefully Peter will get in. And if there's someone else from the hive mind who can do the who can go the distance, go ahead and grab that link and I'll bring in. But I'm only going to bring in two people, and you have to have your camera on. And part of the reason I limit it to the membership section, if you want to know how these people get in here, there is a list of sort of TLC pillars that I send the link to when I do this. And then I also drop the link in the post on the membership thing in my channel. So that way it's not the completely open internet. It's sort of estuarial. So, all right, Mark, thank you. Mark pitched three things. He pitched the AI Dalfit podcast that just came out that I made a video on this morning. He pitched his church / evangelicalism in America. And I'd love to talk about the Stone Campbell revival. I started, okay, we got one. I started digging into that after your House of Ooh live stream, because I think, Mark, you're right that there's some real interesting continuity between TLC and the Stone Campbell revival in terms of what they were trying to do. I think it's super interesting. So yeah, and then also the change of muck into suburbanism. All right, so we got our extras. All right, so here we go. Ron, what would you like to pitch to the group?
I think what I've been intrigued with lately, in certainly the United States, but I think around the world, is how do we know what we know? Like when we argue about politics, or when our nation's leaders go to other countries to argue about politics, the means by which we find any kind of common ground has completely eroded. And but the confidence in which we presume our grounds being common, that confidence seems to have skyrocketed. And so thinking in terms of Jesus calling us to be salt and light, or just thinking in terms of being good citizens, how do we engage in conversation with people who may differ dramatically with us politically or economically or religiously? And so I'm just, as somebody who's kind of worked in conflict settings all my life, I'm really intrigued with how the rules of the game for conflict work or don't, or what they even are, if there are any. So I'm intrigued with what seems to be happening in terms of how we approach conflict these days on all sorts of different levels.
All right, this is a very TLC pitch that Ron just gave, because I think in many ways the entire project of Estuary and TLC revolves around this challenge that we have civilizationally right now. Okay, Jason, what would you like to pick?
To be fair, Paul pitched this idea to me at Grandma's when we were there for coffee after church. So, kidding, just kidding.
All right, Jason, what would you like to pitch?
Wow, coffee after church, man. Forgot about that. Hopefully there were some windmill cookies involved. Man, that was a thing. Yeah, maybe hopefully someone will have something more interesting. But what I've been thinking and writing about recently is Louise Perry had talked about are women inherently liberal, and she gave some talking points around that in terms of their greater aversion for risk and their care and concern for people and their more egalitarian relationships and so on. And so I started thinking about that in terms of Paul's admonition that husbands should love their wives and wives should respect their husbands. So I'm wondering if conservatives need to love their liberals and if liberals need to respect their conservatives. And I've been kind of playing that out too in recovery as well, that you almost need a marriage of those two things in order to really make recovery work. You need someone who's nurturing and understands what the baby's face means and all that kind of stuff. But you also need somebody who's comfortable with letting a kid get their knees scraped and suffer some consequences for things and to hold some standards up. So that's kind of what I've been thinking and writing about.
Wow, Jason comes in with you got all the elements in there. You got some Petersonian archetypes, masculine, feminine. You got recovery language. Chad, you could be in trouble, man. You could be in trouble. Jason just came in here and he pitched hard. So, all right, Chad, you're muted. You got a pitch for us? Or you're gonna pass?
Yeah, I can pitch. I don't know if my connection is good. If it's not, you're gonna have to let me know. Then I'll hop out. But
okay, so good so far.
Okay, I was thinking about like how do I what do I do with a post meaning crisis and and how do I address that seriously? I mean, I do have recovery tools and things like that, but yeah, this has been difficult for me. There was a conversation yesterday that I was listening to that triggered me, and I don't know exactly why it triggered me the way that it did, but I also didn't like my reaction to it. And I think that's the question. How do I deal with the post meaning crisis that I didn't see coming?
That is just a boy, Chad. I feel I could just do a video on that right now. That is awesome. All right, Caleb. You've been we lost Caleb. Just when I
They lost me for a second. I pressed the unmute button and it decided to unmute me from reality.
It's the reverse of Beetlejuice. You say his name and he disappears.
That's right. Caleb, introduce yourself a little bit.
Hi, I'm Caleb. I don't know what I can introduce myself with. I am a Christian. What else?
How did you find the TLC? How long you been around?
I've been around. If people are paying attention, they probably know who I am. But I'm electing for the sake of video purposes to not put my username on the on the stream.
We won't dox you.
That's right. But I've been around for since at least 2020, probably 2019.
Okay.
Here and there.
All right.
Yeah, that's
so. What would you like to pitch, Caleb?
Actually, here's something interesting. Part of what attracted me to the stream was Jason's banjo, because I'm also a banjo picker.
Claw hammer or three finger?
I started out three finger, and then I moved over to claw hammer because I was invited to lead a worship session for a period of time when I was in college, and I didn't know the guitar very well, and I was like, well, I can play the banjo, and I asked the person who was asking me, "Is it all right if I play the banjo?" And they're like, "Yeah, whatever," you know. And so I learned to lead worship with the banjo. It didn't end the best, let's say, but it works for what I needed it to, I guess. Um, so I'm in clawhammer because that's a lot easier to sing with than three finger style. Anyways, we can talk a lot of banjo if you let me. So I'm going to divert.
boy.
That wouldn't be what I would like to pitch.
We
as
went
much
from
as I'd
Dutch
like.
bingo to banjo, and Jason Yonker is the bridge. But anyway, Caleb, you got a pitch for us?
I
Besides
do
banjo?
actually. So, well, yeah, well, it's hard. So there's been a lot of. It's interesting that I popped on now because you guys are talking a lot about your Dutch background and how it interacts with your relationship with the church. I'm of Chinese background. I was born in America, um, but my forefathers, as it were, are from China. Um, and I grew up. I spent the first maybe 5, 6 years of my life in a independent Chinese church. Then ended up moving to an well, called an American church. That's really non-specific, but not Chinese church. To make it less specific. And I'm interested. It's so fascinating to see how you guys' backgrounds uh, interact with the church because the CRC is necessary or kind of by nature an ethnic church, although it kind of isn't exactly that way now. Um, and so, as somebody who's not only no longer going to a church that's tied with their home culture, um, but China as a country has a really complicated relationship with with Christianity. It's never been a Christian nation. Um, like the closest we get is like there's a huge movement of Nestorian Christians back in the 7th century, um, and we have remnants of that. And then it's not till like maybe the 17th century or the 17th and 18th century that we really get any more Christians, and then that's mainly Christians from the Western Church, Catholics and Protestants, which is interesting. So I'm trying to cohere this into a whole pitch, but it's mainly I'm asking about like, okay, how do you? And this might not be relevant at all. How do you, as somebody whose background is intrinsically tied to Christianity, just by historical standards, how do you think people who are of a background who is not in any way tied to Christianity, well, very very little tied to Christianity, should approach Christianity now? Like, should China submit to the Catholics or the Orthodox, or maybe they should submit to the Baptist Church, or all become Presbyterian? Like, what a strange, or they'll all become Lutherans. You know, it's a very strange kind of, or maybe they should all form their own national church, like they kind of already have. I guess it kind of ties into the whole like we were talking about Chinese bishops a lot during the Pope talks, stuff like that. I don't know. That's that. I hope that kind of is coherent enough to counter the pitch.
That is very coherent. That was excellent, Caleb. That was excellent, and to me, much more engaging than banjo talk. Although, if that's what wins the votes, we'll talk about banjos.
I will play the banjo for you later if you still request it.
Whoa!
We'll have a banjo off with Jason.
Well, you know, if y'all make some music videos in the corner, I will steal them and use them for branding. So if you do make a banjo video, let me know, and I like playing the branding. I was 15 minutes before the start. It's like, should I start branding now? Nah, people complain there's too much branding. And then I got distracted by something. It was 5 minutes, like, oh, not enough branding. But here we are. Daniel, introduce yourself. How did you I also put out a link because there wasn't a lot of uptake very quickly on this week's. And so I actually put out a link on CRC Voices, and with a last name like that, And again, most people are like, last name like what? No, we Dutchmen, we've got, let's see, it's Radar, Gaydar. I don't know the Dutch version of Gaydar, but we got
Dutch-dar.
it.
Yeah.
What's that?
Dutch-dar.
Dutch-dar? I don't know.
Hollandar.
Hollandar. There, that's good. Hollandar.
Oh, you're offending my Friese.
I know you're Frisian, but we accept you in America.
Yeah, my grandma was Frisian, so
My whole mom's side is Frisian.
Yeah.
We just got to keep in donk. We were in the Netherlands for a meeting of Estuary. We had a lovely big group of people sitting in a circle, all going to have some sweet communal Estuary vibes. And John Van Donk says the most offensive thing about the Frisians right there in the middle. And it was like, you know, 1/3 of the group is suddenly upset. I'm like, Van Donk, what are you doing?
Did he say they're not stubborn? Is that...
Let's not start. Daniel, introduce yourself.
Hey, everybody. So my name is Daniel Dreistra. I was born and raised here in beautiful Abbotsford, British Columbia. Yep. So Canadian, so double whammy, you know, very Dutch, very Canadian. And I just graduated from Dort last May. So I don't know if there's any other Dort people in this in the corner, but I'm sure there's a few.
There are a few
here and there. So Dort is kind of adjacent to Calvin, different, but adjacent to Calvin. So I spent 4 years in Northwest Iowa, and then I spent 6 months actually living in Hawaii, working for a farm there. And then I've been back home since my dad got sick last November. So I've been home since then. And I've been a part of the corner, a long time lurker, probably like 4 or 5 years. I've watched you, Paul. I've never really interacted. I've never, never taken this step, but I had a Friday, I had an opportunity today. And I was like, and then you sent the email out. I've been gifted subs, I guess, gifted memberships. I don't know exactly how this all works. So I was gifted membership, and then you sent me the email, and I was like, oh, okay. I have free time. So let's try and make this next step into participation, I guess.
All right.
So
Speaking
that's
of
kind of my
gift-
story.
All right. Speaking of gifted memberships, I just dropped 5. Google lets me gift 10 a month just free. So I just dropped 5 more into the, for all of you cheapskates out there that don't really want to cough up $3 a month for a membership. You don't get a lot for it, but you do get access to this link on, 2 or 3 times a month, probably. So there you go. There's 5 free memberships for all of you Frisians out there and Dutchmen that know how to pinch a penny. Okay, Daniel, you know how the estuary works?
Not really.
Okay. Well, it's your turn to pitch an idea to the group. It can be something intellectual, it can be something contextual, it can be something personal, or it can be something estuarial. So choose.
I suppose I've been kind of in these last few months interested in Jordan Hall and his conversion and his kind of thesis for solving the meta crisis. And he seems to have proposed that the solution is a local church, a healthy local church, essentially, and then all things rise up from that. I think that's probably fair to say. And I find it. I'm 22. And I live in one of the most expensive parts of the entire world, up here in BC, close to Vancouver. And I find it a little bit convenient for him, who is very successful and has earned his way and can afford a home, to put that forward as a solution. When I look around and I think, man, the simple reality is that my parents have had a higher quality of life than I probably will have at the same age, just based on our situation and where I am at. And so I just wonder if we need to do more, I suppose, to the jump to post-liberal society has real casualties, I suppose. And so I'm just opening it up to that somehow. If you guys are following, I don't know.
I'm following. That's a good way to put it. I wish I had those words in a video that I released this week that caused a little drama. So I got an email from a longtime TLC or what the ever loving F about my video. It's like, oh, touched the nerve, did I? All right, PVK as dentist. Mark D. Parker in this round 3.
Oh my gosh, this were
round, you gotta
excellent.
point to something. I know there's been a lot of great pitching.
These are really good because I went from going, oh, Ron's good. Then I went to Jason. Oh man, Jason up there. Then Chad. Oh, I want that. I think and I think Caleb's is the hub of the wheel. And we can talk about everybody's stuff pretty much through Caleb's pitch. So I'm a hard yes on Caleb.
Okay.
Plus he is millennial at least, or Zoomer. How old are you, sir?
I'm like right on the border of millennial and Zoomer. Although I've often failed to fit into either generation in temperament.
So you're just about my
I pick
kid's
a banjo
age, which
after
makes
all.
I'm even more heartwarmed towards you. So it's Caleb.
You will. Do you get much pressure from your parents, Caleb, about producing a grandchild?
Probably less than some other people. But yes, I wouldn't. But I also feel the internal pressure. I would, that's something that I wouldn't act like that.
Well, anybody who's got difficulty with their parents, if they produce a grandchild, there's major points in grandchild production. Major points. All right, Ron. Ron,
Well
who
noted.
has successfully, your chat says, oh, well, I'm not going to dig into that on the internet. Ron, you're muted. So what would you like to point to of what has been pitched?
Let's see. I'm going to go. I'm going to go with Caleb's also, I think.
Oh. All right. Wow, Caleb, that's 2 votes right out of the bat. Jason, what would you like to point to?
Yeah, I feel a little bit like we're an Asher's Line experiment, and I'm being influenced by the previous folks. But yeah, the intersection of ethnicity, identity, and Christianity is kind of interesting.
Okay. Excellent. Chad, what would you like to vote for?
Excuse me, the dude that lives in Canada that talked about his world today is different than his parents. The last guy that shared. Sorry, I didn't catch your name. Sorry about that.
Daniel.
Thank you, Daniel. Yeah, Daniel.
All right. Excellent. Thank you, Chad. Caleb, you're ahead on the votes, but you can't vote for yourself. So who do you want to give your vote to?
I mean, there was a lot of good votes. I feel like I felt a little bad about Mark voting for me because I actually, on the transition of me trying to get into the stream, I totally missed his pitch.
Mark had 3 pitches. Mark pitched, in case you want to do the reciprocal pitching, which is sometimes done. He pitched the AI Dowfit video that I talked about this morning. He pitched evangelicalism in America, and then he pitched the disaster of the disappearance of muck farms in West Michigan and how that is destroying the Christian Reformed Church. So those were his 3 pitches.
I really like the muck farm.
The collapse of Dutch culture in America.
That's right. I'd love to hear about it. But besides, actually, AI was going to be the other idea if I hadn't forgotten it on the way in, because that's something that's been heavily on my mind. With been listening, I've been knocking AI. It seems like I can't avoid it as much as I really like to. So if I had to guess, if I had to say yes to a pitch, that would be the one. Although I really resonate with Chad's pitch about the post-meaning crisis, meaning crisis, the after crisis. But in any case, that's my vote.
All right, excellent, Caleb. Daniel, what would you like to point to? You point to a topic that you came in late, so I don't know if you heard all the topics.
I think I'll abstain because I came in late. So
okay, so you're going to abstain. I am going to pitch Chad's actually. Chad's really grabbed me. But a close second would definitely be the intersection of ethnicity, identity, and Christianity, because that, unlike every other major world religion, Christianity begins in translation. Christianity, right from the start, had a capacity of moving between cultures. Because in a world where, in many cases, your religion was tied to your ethne, Christianity, and actually I'm preaching about it this Sunday, Christianity makes a leap into a non-ethne religion. But that, that those ties between religion and ethne are really tight, because you have, here I voted for Chad, and now I'm already participating in the winner of the vote, because the
They're the
hearth,
same thing, aren't they? Kinda.
there is deep connection in them, Chad. You're exactly right. And the video that caused some heat, the whole woke right thing, this is all about those issues. And Jason Staples' books on the New Testament, and this is why the Israel-Gaza conflict just scrambles the world, because even, I could go on and on and on and on. So yes, Caleb wins, but I certainly, as always with Estuary, other topics that we'll put on the table are fair game to be lifted off the table to see if and when they gain traction with the group. So here we go. Caleb, why don't you say a little bit? I'd love for you to say a little bit more, because there's a Reformed, an RCA Chinese community. It used to be RCA. They left the RCA church. Chinese community just up the road from us. There are, in the Sacramento area, there's a significant Chinese population historically, of course, because of California and the gold rush. And Chinese, there are a lot of Chinese Baptists around. And of course, they've been in California, some of them, of course, you have the indigenous populations, and then you have the Russians and the Mexicans who sort of come in. And of course, in California, you have the monasteries, but then the Chinese come in very quickly, of course, during the gold rush, because they do a ton of labor. And so the Chinese population has been here for years, and the Chinese Baptist population is well established. And some of the Chinese evangelical churches in Sacramento are large, thriving concerns. And one of the most important Christian Reformed churches in all of California is the Golden Gate Church in San Francisco, which is a large, thriving congregation that has a worship service in Mandarin, a worship service in Cantonese, and a worship service in English. And they're in the Christian Reformed Church. So that's a great topic. So why don't you flesh out a little bit more about why you pitched this and what you're thinking?
Well, actually, it's so just as it's relevant, so it's not exactly an aside. But it's funny that you mentioned the church down the road from you splitting off from the RCA, because actually the church that I grew up in, I mentioned I spent about 5 or 6 years in an independent Chinese church. The reason why it was independent is because originally it was a part of the RCA, and because of the RCA's position on certain Taiwanese politics, let's say, they ended up splitting off because they severely disagreed with the RCA's position of things during that time. I don't know if we want to go into the whole history of things, or if that might take away a little too much from the topic. But I mean, it's not. I guess it's not entirely irrelevant, because it shows you a bit of the clash and between the cultures there, and sort of what's the role of the church in a country that's, again, not historically Christian as such. Although Chiang Kai-shek, because I think Tom Holland mentioned in the beginning of Dominion, he mentioned that Chiang Kai-shek quoted the Bible. I think it might have quoted Jesus at the end of the Second World War.
Wasn't his
very
wife
interesting
Christian?
to me. Yes, pretty sure.
Yeah.
Although it's funny, was it Kublai Khan's wife is also Christian now that I think about it. So
He probably had
that's
a
a
few
whole
though.
yeah, probably true. It is he all emperors have a lot. So
Yeah. So then you'd have one Christian in the mix. Not terribly
Mm.
surprising.
But anyways, so to try and break back into things a little bit. Part of the reason why it's been on my mind recently, let's start there, is because I recently moved to a new area, and there's a part of and it's closer to my family now. Um, I moved recently from Indiana in a place that's like 90% white people, and like 7% Hispanics and like 3% black people. You can probably count as many Chinese, and then there is me. No, it's funny. I used to joke that probably the only other Chinese people you'd see in town are in the local Chinese restaurant. Um, but um, but now
Of
that I
which
moved back
every
up,
town has a Chinese restaurant.
yeah,
And that's not just in the US. It's all over the world.
that's right. Our greatest cultural export. Even though there's a certain degree to which some of that stuff has no resemblance to actual Chinese food. Um, but that's neither here nor there. It's still pretty delicious most of the time. Um, so now that I moved back up here, where there is not a huge Chinese population, but there is one. I've recently, so when I was down in Indiana, I actually attended for the first time. Like, I grew up relatively low church, and then for the first time, I attended an Anglican church of the Reformed Episcopal Church variety, um, and that kind of blew my socks off a little bit because for years I've been kind of reading about historic Christianity and reading some of the earlier Christian writers like Saint Augustine, Saint Athanasius. Thanks to C.S. Lewis, who is no small part a huge contributor to my Christian life, as I'm sure he is to many. And so now I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'd like to go now that I'm in an area now that I can no longer go to there's no Anglican church like it in the area that I moved to. So now I'm like, okay, well, now that I think about it, what kind of church do I want to go to? And so I was thinking, oh, okay, well, the Lutherans are an easy kind of like I hate to call it second highest church in Protestantism, but they're of a similar bent, let's say. So I was thinking, oh, okay, let's do that. But I've been like floating around various churches, not all high church. I've been to a couple of non-denominational just for the heck of it. I was thinking of attending an African American church too. It's just to see. Never been to one. Uh, but I was thinking to myself, and I've met a couple of missionaries. I've been back to my childhood church, which is kind of falling apart. That's a whole issue. And I've been thinking about, it's like, okay, we have all these churches that have their roots in Germany and in Switzerland and the Netherlands, obviously. All kinds of places in Europe. The Roman Church, I guess, is based in Rome. And also, I've also been attending I've been to a couple of Eastern Orthodox services, which are based in their various Russian and whatever. I keep wanting to say Constantinopolitan roots, but whatever. I think I don't know if that quite works. Various roots, Greek roots, we'll call it that. And I've been sitting here thinking, okay, and then there's always the option for me to go back to a Chinese church of its various sorts. I've also been to a Korean church for some reason. That was weird. And so I've been thinking to myself, it's like, okay, I really like the liturgy that you have in the more traditional churches, but those are the traditional European churches. If I went to a church that was more, let's say, ethnically have more ethnic ties to, I would necessarily have to go to either well, actually, I was gonna say, I necessarily have to go to to a more of like a closer to a non-denominational, maybe Baptist-ish kind of church. With the I was about to say that, and I was stopping myself saying because there is like technically Chinese Catholic churches out there. There just isn't any around me. There's a Korean Catholic church and not a Chinese Catholic church. There must be a lot of Koreans around now that I think about it. Anyways, so I've been thinking about it. It's like, okay, to what degree am I supposed to be submitting to the I won't call it necessarily the Western traditions because I've been to Eastern Orthodox Church, but to a certain degree, to everything is West besides compared to China, except for Japan and Korea, I guess. But that's uh, so it's like, okay, do I necessarily have to submit to the Western traditions if I want to have like a more traditional style church, which kind of makes sense. It's like, okay, China didn't have Christian. I know somebody in the chat, I can't remember, might have been Matt, mentioned that okay, the Nestorian churches continue to exist since the 7th century, but I feel like there hasn't been a distinctly Chinese flavor of Christianity like you have distinctly German, distinctly Dutch, distinctly Roman, um, and various other, or even this again distinctly, as it were, Greek or distinctly. Russian or Syrian type churches. And so it's like, okay, is it, I mean, it's awful to say, but there's a part of me that thinks, am I betraying a certain part of myself if I submit to these more European traditions? Am I betraying the part of myself that is Chinese? Now that's as to whether that's betrayable for the sake of Christ. Obviously, it should be. Obviously, my identity as a Chinese descendant, Chinese by descent, should take subordination to my identity as a Christian. But shouldn't, if everybody else has their kind of like, you have your not allegiances, affiliations, affections, relation to your Dutch background, even through your church, should I not also work to have an affiliation to my Chinese background through my version of church? And I've had people say it's like, oh yeah, Christianity is like a Western religion because it's like, and there's from the Chinese perspective, that's kind of just true.
But
even though I think it's broader
from a Chinese perspective. Indians,
yeah, pretty much.
But what's interesting is that I wonder to what degree the independent Church of China that has, sort of been against the government, sort of grew up. So what happened in the world during the colonial period is that the colonial powers sent out missionaries that were often wedded with government power. So Anglican churches, Roman Catholic churches, these colonial powers seeded churches into other lands. And then what happened in sort of the post-colonial period is that there was often a severing, and then so-called indigenous churches would spring up. That's happening in Africa, that's happening in Asia, and it's been happening in China because you have sanctioned churches and unsanctioned churches. The question will come, whereas in China, the colonial suppression isn't coming from England or Spain or France or one of those European far-off countries. The colonial suppression is coming from the Chinese communist government. When Chinese communism finally sort of collapses, which may mean, again, the breakup of China, which is a perennial issue in China, it could be then that at that point, a much more indigenous Chinese Christianity emerges, as we've seen the emergence of certain African strains of Christianity. That your question will get answered, but for now, I think your question's a great one.
Yeah, it's a great one in the sense of it seems insurmountable.
Well, but the Christian Reformed Church, as I've talked about in the channel, has been wrestling with this for years because in 1980, I've posted the cover of Andy Kuyvenhoven's banner article about burning the wooden shoes. In the civil rights movement in America, there was a self-conscious effort in the Christian Reformed Church to get rid of Dutch culture and indigenize. And I know Canadian Dutch immigration was interesting because the Dutch Canadian immigration happened after the Second World War, and many Dutch immigrants went to Canada and self-consciously very quickly attempted to indigenize. The post-World War II immigrant waves in the Christian Reformed Church came to America and Canada and said, we're Americans, we're Canadians, we're not Dutch. The 19th century immigrants came to America. They didn't go to Canada. They came to America and said, we're Dutch and we're going to hold on to our Dutchness as long as possible. And so there's so many layers in what you're talking about, Caleb.
Yeah, just as an example, I'll jump in, sorry. But yeah, all four of my parents are from Holland, or my grandparents. They're all from the homeland. And a couple of my uncles and aunts are actually directly from Holland as well. But I speak no Dutch. And my parents that were not born in Holland speak no Dutch, even though some of their siblings do. So,
and that's common in
the
CRC now.
But if you go to Orange City, Iowa, where everybody immigrated in 1850, they still have the Tulip Festival every year, where they dress up in the costumes and they have the wooden shoes. So,
and Jason and Ron smile because Granville and Hudsonville, with the much depleted muck farms, is right next to Holland, Michigan, where they have the mother of all tulip festivals and a wooden shoe factory that Christian Reformed people would make pilgrimages to.
The holy city.
Yeah, but I think that the issue,
Kloppen dancing, not ashamed to admit it. You know.
All right, Jason Kloppen, go ahead, Ron.
You guys know all this stuff about the West Michigan Dutch culture that I don't even know about. Even I got to catch up. But what I hear us talking about is, what does it mean to be in the world but not of it? Like, to what extent are we citizens of part of this world, or to what extent are we, we talk about having our allegiances in this world as being a secondary allegiance after followers of Christ. But I know I grew up assuming that being a follower of Christ meant being like we all were. And that meant being white, being Midwestern, suburbanite, meaning Dutch. And I've now realized I've just moved back to West Michigan after most of my adulthood being away in different places. And yeah, that I can't tie my identity very much at all to an ethnicity, whether it's Dutch American, whether it's Chinese American, or anything else. That's not where our identity comes from, but obviously that's a force that shapes us. And so, as followers of Christ, what does it mean to be genuinely in our world or our worlds, but not actually be of them?
One of the things I thought about when you were talking about the church in China, Caleb, and then Paul, you brought up that the oppression is internal, not external, within the culture, and that was the state of Christianity for better part of its first 300 years. It was alienated from the levers of power within the empire by a great empire. And when it was liberated, ultimately it exploded with all this energy had built up and thought and organization. Really, it didn't stop Christianity from just deepening. It just then bloomed. It took over the empire very quickly once Constantine took the lid off. But what I would fear for Chinese Christianity, I'm very interested in what Chinese Christianity and what Indian Christianity and what African Christianity is going to bring to us, because we need to be saved. I think Western Christianity is a catastrophe. I would say American, and I've been, this is after doing a deep study, I'm neck deep in a study of the history of evangelicalism in America. And it is an all out, I called my own church a shit show. It is the grander shit show presiding over all the little shit shows spread across this continent. And I mean this very specifically and in a way that the Chinese Christianity, Eastern Christianity could actually fix us. That is not Eastern Orthodox, but a new Eastern Christianity out of the cultures of India and China, is that evangelicalism in America after the American Revolution began as an individualistic reaction to authority. The Second Great Awakening, Arminianism against Calvinism, boom, sweeps across. Then we get, and with each subsequent awakening, Second Great Awakening, Azusa Street in 1906, Jesus People, it's individualism doubling down again and again and again. More individual, more internal, more about me, more performative, right? And then we have just recently the Asbury revival, which took place just an hour's drive from Cane Ridge in Kentucky.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Yes, that's close. Named after Francis, the university is named after Francis Asbury, the man who basically stayed during the Revolution and solidified Methodism in America. They say he's more responsible than Wesley for making Methodism great in America.
Really?
Yes, and by the early 19th century, it was the largest Protestant denomination within the United States. It was powerful, but it shaped everything that came after it.
Yeah.
And that revival culture, what you have then in Asbury, it's so individualistic.
Yeah.
Go to the testimonies online. It's bone chilling when you stop to think about it, because they have all this mystical, wonderful music behind it and in the background, all these interviews. And we're all supposed to be heartwarmed by these young people who have these deeply internal, deeply individualistic experiences. And they're very proud, very, very proud of the fact that there's no preachers. This is unorchestrated. This is unplanned. As soon as somebody older stands up to preach, the spirit left the room. But when a young person, a Zoomer, it's like a cultural revolution within evangelicalism in this moment for 2 weeks.
Oh, it's like the Jesus people. I mean, that was the same thing with the Jesus people.
Same thing, only more so. There's not even a Lonnie Frisbee at Asbury, right? There's no standout personality, theology, teaching whatsoever. It is all we got internal healing. We're deeply wounded. They're deeply traumatized by COVID, the lockdowns, the disruption to their lives, the grooming that's been going on with the algorithms through social media that's been taking place on their consciousness. This is just like what all the other revivals, a traumatized population suddenly finding healing in this revival experience, but it's more individualistic than ever. And what I was hoping for a Chinese Pope. And
you got an American one.
But we got an American. I'm the only American who's disappointed we got an American Pope. I really hope that something very new and different will come along and break us out of this 200-year dream of I'm one person by myself in the world.
All right. Wow. Jason, Daniel, Ron, we've had some big takes from Mark and Caleb here.
I can say a little bit about that. I think Mark's expressing a kind of ennui for some traditionalism and some authority and some guidance in the world rather than just the nurturing of this inner sacred self. And I think that's directly related to what Caleb's asking about. My identity as a descendant of Chinese, my identity as a Christian, and how do those interact? And as I look at it, it was such a it was so much the air that I breathed as a child that I don't think I could properly distinguish between when is a situation calling forth my Dutch identity and when is it calling forth Christianity, and how I know those things are different. And there was a real sense that everyone believed these Christian truths, and that was the thing that we didn't ever want you to walk away from. But the Dutch thing was there too. Maybe the Dutch was a bit more familial kind of valence to it, but there was a real sense of we're spending money to send you to a Christian school, bub, because we want you to understand everything through this lens. I don't want you to get lost in that world out there. And I found as I've left that area and come out here to Phoenix, I've had a deep ennui for that. And I look at my generation of Generation X, my friend group. I might be the only one who's still Christian, much less Reformed. And I'm like, what have we lost? What did we walk away from? Holy cow. I look at my grandpa and my grandma, and I'm just like, what did we lose? We were so snotty. And it's kind of terrifying in some sense. But is it the Dutchness? How is it? It's not the Dutchness, but how is the Dutchness related to the Christianity? Because it was somehow, and in some ways contradictory ways, because we did want to reach out to everybody. We did see Christianity as something that we wanted to share with the world, but we wanted to stay Dutch too. There was things in conflict with it, I don't know, but I feel it more than I think it. I'll just say that. Like I feel a little bit of what Daniel's talking about as well, with I can't afford to live somewhere and settle down and find a church. Like, yeah, what did my grandparents have and my parents that we just don't now?
I hear that in Chad's, because when I look at the passion at which many in our circles in the TLC have embraced orthodoxy now, and many of those who have embraced it are sort of generic American individualists. And so now, sort of with orthodoxy, you can get the whole package. And so you're going to go to an Orthodox church, it's going to be in Romanian, but you don't care. So I went to I was at a service in Ireland with Paul Kingsnorth and Martin Shaw and Christian Baxter, and stood through a mostly Romanian service in Galway, Ireland. And to me, it was like, but obviously some of the others were there, and they're like, okay, so then it's like, well, what part of this is the desire to get deeply rooted in an ethne that has, land?
But can you,
Paul, real quick,
as an individual who's in this consumeristic culture searching for something, can you obtain it that way, or do you have to be born in it the way it's just in every fiber of my being?
Yeah,
I can't escape, laughing about mud.
Yeah.
Right.
Go ahead, Mark. You want to be real quick? Then I want to hear from Daniel.
Yeah, really, really fast. After trashing evangelicalism, I think it's really important for me to point out that its virtue is that, particularly of the more charismatic it is, the more experience driven it is, its power with people who can't make that steep intellectual climb into orthodoxy or even high church, whether it's Catholicism or something. They just, it's too much for them. There's a directness to the experience, to the Billy Graham message, and that's its power. And somehow the people who venture off into the heady waters of orthodoxy, and they need to remember to bring it back. if they just go there to be self-satisfied and to enrich their own spiritual life, I think they've missed the calling. It's to find it and then bring it back, particularly for people who have an evangelical background, so that we've got to qualitatively deepen the evangelical experience as a church, as a community, as churches.
All right, Daniel, thoughts?
Yeah, I have a few thoughts. I'm going to try and put them together here. I don't know how well it's going to go, but I know that personally, like my grandparents both moved away from their homes. So my grandma, her family, they immigrated to Terrace, and then she moved here to Abbotsford. My grandpa, he immigrated to Bowmanville, Ontario, and then immigrated to Abbotsford after they got married. And so they left home, first from Holland and then within Canada. But now all my uncles and aunts live here, and the family ties are very strong. We have very strong family ties. And then my exterior parents, they said, hey, go out into the world and, get educated, go work somewhere else. So I did that. I went to Dort in Northwest Iowa, and then I went to Hawaii for 6 months and worked there. And so I did the thing, I left home, I crossed the threshold, whatever you want to call it. And there was never pressure to come home, even though I always knew that my mom would like it if I came home. Of course, right? There was never pressure. There really wasn't.
You just know.
You just know, right? And then my dad got sick last November, and I got on a plane and I came home, and it was like that was the thing to do. And those family ties are integral to the Christian experience, I think. Like as much as you can develop them, it's easier if they're blood, but if you can develop them, in the spiritual sense as well, that's essential to the Christian experience, I think. For me, that meant, sacrificing Maui for, the British Columbia and the rainy weather that we have here and the impossible housing market. And we're going to figure it out, but I'm committed to home. This is home. And my church that I grew up in is my church, and I'm going to stay here. And I'm kind of going to reject the advice of my parents a little bit, and they're of course okay with that. And they're happy to have me back, and I'm happy to be back. I'm finding it's not so bad, actually. It's actually quite good. And the connection to church and to home and to my family members and my friends here from high school and elementary school it runs really deep. And it just wasn't there when I was away. And so it feels like a genuine home, and I feel blessed to be home, I guess, even though the circumstances are not ideal. I don't know, Mark, you kind of talking about the evangelical church and the culture that the boomer mentality, I think, was like, go get a job in Houston, and then that's where you make money and the houses are cheap. So go there. That's where the good life is a little bit. And in America, everybody moves for work. Everybody does, right? They move for work. And I'm like sitting here like, not worth it. We're gonna figure it out here.
But you're also looking at the price of housing as Abbotsford. I mean, you mentioned that as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We're gonna work through it.
Because it used to be in the CRC. So both Ron and I come from ministerial households, and in the CRC, the ministerial household moved between colonies.
Yep. Yeah. There's four churches here plus the Chinese church. So first, second, third, fourth, fifth.
There you go, Caleb. You can have a choice. You can do Chinese or Dutch if you go to Abbotsford. Ron, what are your thoughts on this, Ron?
There's a quote that I heard, and I can't think of where it's from, but somebody said God has no grandchildren. And the point of the quote is, it's talking about individuals, but the point is, if you have mom and dad are children of God, mom and dad have a child, say one of us, that child is not God's grandchild. And what God wants is for his children's child to come up alongside the parents spiritually so they can all be God's children. And the point that this writer had was that there's got to be some kind of breaking away and rebellion against the structures, the channels through which his experience of God as his own childhood came from. Otherwise, that person is simply inheriting one's faith via mom and dad rather than having it from a personal connection to God through a personal relationship. I think the same thing applies not only to individuals, but also to groups or to denominations or Christian subcultures. And on the one hand, I hear us all talking about dissonance that we have with various Christian cultures or Christian traditions, and that's painful and disorienting. At the same time, it strikes me as it's probably a really healthy thing, because what's really important is that 20 years from now, each of us are part of some kind of Christian community that has a personal firsthand connection to God through Jesus Christ, rather than, even if that comes at the expense of the form that took, say, a generation prior to us. And so on the one hand, there's dissonance in what I hear us talking about. On the other hand, I see that as an important part of grandchildren, children of God's children, finding their own place in God's family.
Isn't that the function of confession of faith?
Part of it, yeah.
For you to break away from your parents and say, this is, in a Calvinist tradition, to say, this is me saying, I don't know this stuff.
Yeah. Now, in my own case, my parents always made a point of, don't do this because my dad's a pastor, like Paul said. Don't do this because your dad's a minister. Or don't do this because, certainly not because you're Dutch. They do it because you're a Christian. And so I think they said and intended all the right things. On the other hand, I think my brothers and I kind of knew what the straight and narrow was, and this was the path to tread on. And I didn't really start to rethink that until my kids were old enough to start having some of these conversations.
This is so interesting to me. Phlebas has noted sort of the generational divide. Now, Mark, of course, part of what I see happening is, and I love how Chad's pitch sort of really cemented this, because what I hear from Chad is that, okay, we saw the meaning crisis, so we have the TLC, and so Chad, he before he got here, Chad had achieved sobriety or been gifted sobriety, but after the Peterson pipeline, Chad goes to a Lutheran church, and he's embedded in the Lutheran church, and he has a child and a wife. But after the video, I'll probably play Chad's poem again, which is just this haunting poem, which is really, I think, has everything to do with children feeling abandoned by their parents. There's yet another thing coming out now about what divorce has done to an entire generation of population. And I think there's that element. Then there's also sort of immigration. Immigration is sort of a multi-generational divorce where you lose your roots. And part of, I think, the real pushback against the Enlightenment has been, Mark's cry that he made here about the promise of Enlightenment was, and the promise of, let's say, the nanny state is that you don't have to have children to not starve in old age. You can have Social Security. You don't have to kowtow to dad's demand that you take over the family business. You can go to university, get an education, and work when and wherever you want to. And so part of what we had, and of course this came to fever pitch in the 60s with the counterculture against the man. It's promising a rootless condition. And who is that globalist who said, "You will own nothing and be happy," which also sort of said, "You will be owned by nothing." And so there's this sense of alienation that I hear underneath. And on one hand, you've the Christianity that sort of comes through Methodism, and it's very interesting because before Ron and I, the great threat of our grandparents' generation, Ron, in the Christian Reformed Church was Methodism. Well, the Christian Reformed Church has to stay away from Methodism. And so then we're going to emphasize the canons of Dort because Methodism is the enemy. But that shift that happens in the Christian Reformed Church from the first wave of immigration before the First World War, and then the after second wave immigration, which comes, even though both groups of immigrants were looking for economic stability. The first immigration wave came and said, we're going to plant New Netherlands here in America. And so Van Raalte names the city he founds what? Holland and Graafschap and Borculo. And I mean, West Michigan is just populated with town names from the Netherlands. That generation came and said, we're going to plant America. We're going to plant the Netherlands in a new world, just like they did in the early colonial period. The post-World War II immigrants come and say, we're not even going to teach our kids Dutch. We're going to be Canadians. We're going to be Americans. We're going to move to where the jobs are. And that, Phlebas is noting, Phlebas again, someone from the CRC, he's noting that, yeah, these boomers, these people were all raised by the second wave of, they're more than happy to burn the wooden shoes. Wooden shoes, what are they? Never worn a pair. Sorry, I'll wear Nikes. So, but I think, Caleb, you had the insight to say, hey, wait a minute. That thing that's going on with you Dutch people, that's been going on for a very long time with the Chinese.
Oh, yeah. No, it was wonderful to hear your talks. Like, I still go back sometimes to you talking about, like, whenever you talk about the whole burning Dutch shoe, burning the wooden shoes thing, because it really speaks to, like, I mean, to be fair, I think the Chinese dynamic is a little bit different because it is kind of ongoing. There's still I don't know the numbers on the rate of immigration, but I think it might be increasing over time. I don't know if that's the way it worked for the Dutch immigrants.
The Dutch had two waves, but they stopped when the Netherlands basically got their feet under them. And then a neighbor moved in behind me next door, came to the States. His wife had lived in the Netherlands a while. I remember talking to him and he was like, you're a Dutch Reformed minister? I hate ministers. Ministers are everything that's wrong in the world. And he and his wife, they then wanted to rent the church because they wanted to do some new age things. And it's like, I don't think my council is going to sanction that in the church. But, and part of the Dutch immigration was the Dutchmen who came over after the war. They had the opportunity to go back and visit, which the old ones never had the chance to do because it was just too expensive. They would go back to the Netherlands and all we would hear was, what's happened to the Netherlands? We can't let that happen to us. Oh, yeah.
No, it's such an interesting dynamic, and again, it's a lot to do with this move away. I guess you talked a lot about, and I've seen Europe's moving away from European countries moving away from Christianity over time, even though they are the traditionally Christian countries. So it's I mean, Mark mentioned, we have the African and Indian churches and the Chinese church, etc., which are actually in some measure growing quite a lot. Technically, India and Africa have more historically Christian roots because you have the Thomas Church, the church that Thomas founded, and then you have the Ethiopian Church and the various offshoots of that. or I shouldn't say offshoots. You know what I mean? Other
We know
Christian
what you mean.
churches that are over there.
Keep going. We've all watched Universal History. At least some of us have.
I'm still waiting for Richard Rollins China episode. It's going to happen one of these days. I hope. Well, maybe not, actually. I hope he does it. Let's say that. I hope you forgive me if I have a chance to talk. I've been kind of taking in everybody's kind of views, whatever you want to call them. One thing is, so I know, so Ron's point that he makes is like, okay, you should be Christian primarily, regardless if that conflicts with your culture. Good, to take Christianity. If it doesn't conflict with your culture, that's fine and good. But Christianity is our identity, primary identity is in Christ. That's true. And I've actually consciously and subconsciously taken that position for a really, really long time. But then I came to realize that huge portions of my own motivation are actually stemming out of my Chinese upbringing. Like maybe my inborn Chineseness. I don't know quite how that works. And so I realized that and I may be wrong about this. I feel like that there are parts of myself that are Chinese and haven't been properly addressed by Christianity, not Christianity. I haven't consciously applied Christianity to those parts of myself. And in order to do that, it's kind of like going to minister to a foreign country, right? You have to understand why it sounds terrible. Why are these people like this? Why are the people that live in these countries, why do they operate? How do they think? And having lived in this sort of American context for so long, I know how the American side of myself works. I pick a banjo, after all. Well, maybe not totally. I'm sure one day I'm sure as I continue to introspect, I'll find other interesting Americanisms about myself that are in conflict with Christianity. But I've been trying. I realized, especially because had some interest in. I took notes down. There's parts of me that almost feel as foundational. Maybe not quite. Like I'm sure I wouldn't like get shot over it necessarily. But there's parts of me that feel this sort of general filial piety thing. I've often thought, and this is the whole thing. Do people know what filial piety means?
Flesh it out for us.
Okay. Filial piety basically is dedication to the family.
Right.
It's the side of Chinese culture that gives us the impulse to venerate the ancestors.
Yes.
Right. Which is I've often thought to myself that Confucius is from a purely popular reception, a much more successful teacher than Plato, because there are very few Platonists now, but nearly every Chinese person is a Confucian.
Wow.
Whether they know it or not. That may be too great a generalization, because obviously it's one of the three teachings, Buddhism and Taoism, but it touches everywhere. It's in the language, just as Taoism's kind of in the language too. But it's really remarkable. Anyways, I mean, it's inside. Why we bring it up is because I feel inside of myself. Like I read the Analects a couple of years ago now, and it's funny because my dad once said, "Oh, we didn't really raise you to be Chinese. We didn't teach you the Analects. That's why I taught myself the Analects." And it turns out by reading the Analects, I discovered there's a lot of. I read it and go, "Oh, that's why we do the things we do. That's why we're the way we are." It's like, oh, okay, this stuff that's now just an assumption for the average Chinese person is once upon a time something that had to be taught, kind of. Confucius will say that he got it from his ancestors, of course.
What's so interesting to me, Caleb, is that in California we have a lot of Korean Christian Reformed churches, and we're just watching this in real time because many of those Korean Christian Reformed churches are sort of doing what the CRC did earlier. I go to these Korean classes meetings. They're all in Korean. We eat great Korean food, but they've had this enormous this enormous struggle with the second generation because and this is happening in the Orthodox Church as well, of course, immigrants come over, this individualism that Mark was talking about is very powerful. And, you know, part of what I'm wrestling with my sermon, I'm really wrestling with my sermon this week, because Christianity does something really different. And I'm preaching on Acts 15, the Council of Jerusalem. When James the Just, Jesus' brother, basically says, you know, it's really this circumcision thing is really hard on the Gentiles. Let's not do that. Let's just meat sacrifice to idols, strangled animals, and sexual immorality. Because Moses has been taught in all of these cities all over the place. So if they stick to these three things, good enough. And you think, holy cow. You know, and I've just, you know, now with all of the conversations with Jacob and Chezi and Yosef, I hear that and I think, wow. And of course, this is Luke writing this. And then you begin to see the progression in the book of Acts, and you see how that's constructed also in Luke. And this wrestling with, let's say, the Platonic. And then, of course, you have orthodoxy developing, which is this amalgam between Platonism, which on one hand says, like Ron did, Jesus, you know, it doesn't matter if there's in Christ, there's no slave nor Greek, no Jew nor Gentile. God, Jesus Christ gives you a new identity. And this just grows like wildfire in cosmopolitan Eastern Empire, where they're all sort of being mixed up in terms of their ethne, and all of their household gods and civic gods are tied to the ethnes, and so on and so forth. And boom, liberation. But then there's the same question of, but then what happens with Christianity is that the first fight in Christianity is the Judaizers who are saying, oh no, that circumcision, that's really important. You better stick to that. And then the others, but then of course, Christianity gets re-indigenized. And so and we're watching this in America. So we've got the Antiochian Orthodox Church and the Greek Orthodox Church and the Russian Orthodox Church. And so then, you know, hey, you know where Methodism comes from? England. You don't get away from any of this stuff.
Seriously. I mean, it's yeah, it's really, I mean, there is a whole, I mean, there's a certain degree to which, like, even the churches that exist in China, I mean, somebody's mentioning that, yeah, there's a lot of Chinese Catholics, and there are, that there's actually some pretty deep settled Catholics in China at the moment, which is why they have an archbishop.
And to what degree has the government been monkeying around in the selection of that?
Didn't was it somebody mentioned that, like, some one of the cardinals or some high Roman church official had, like, given them permission to choose their own bishops? I'm like, oh boy.
Well, and how much
like
did someone like Henry VIII play a hand in I mean, the kings and the kings of Europe before the Reformation played a hand in assigning bishops, and it's been monkeyed around with for a very, very long time. So it doesn't necessarily mean that these are bad bishops.
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
Put them in a position and then see outside of, you know, and they're in Rome or wherever.
Well, one thing I wanted to actually address, and it's not, I think it's relevant. Mark, you mentioned earlier, it's like, oh, I really hope that the Eastern churches and the Chinese, African, Indian churches will be able to give a sort of a revival to Western Christianity, and there's a certain degree to which, yeah, that's my hope too. But of course, you know, they all have their own interesting problems too, as all churches do. What is it? I mean, so to give a little background. You have the Three Self Patriotic movement, which you can tell by the name is be a somewhat of a problematic church. And I won't. There are real Christians there. I can vouch for that. But in Taiwan, the big church over there, the big Protestant church over there is. My dad calls it. Says its name is the local church in Chinese. I think in English they might go by the little flock. And our family has never been. Although I think when they were in Taiwan, they used to go to that sort of church. Although they've never been too favorable of it because it has a lot of the sort of like one true church tendencies that at least my family never particularly liked. Sort of like, which I think is it's a little. I feel like if there is a one true church, surely it has to have. I feel like the arguments from apostolic succession are surely a little bit more persuasive. But anyways, that's a whole other thing. But I thought about that a little bit, where it's like, okay, what happens? Let's say you know, either let's say I don't know, China, the People's Republic gets a Chinese Constantine, right? The whole country is Christian now. Praise be to God. Um, um, I sit there going, okay, let's say that did happen, or like Paul mentioned, is like, okay, maybe there's a really dramatic collapse, and then that kind of emerges a Chinese church in the same vein that there emerged the Roman Church after Rome's collapse. Oh, didn't read that. I was thinking, it was like, okay, I wonder if we would just fall into pretty much the exact same problems that the Western Church would at that point. Maybe give it a couple of centuries. I don't know. Of course, that's just talking about the Chinese Church.
All right, I'm gonna. I mean, our time has gone fast, so I'm going to give some more extended speeches to people based on what we've seen here, and I'm just going to go in order here. So, Mark, thoughts on what we've talked about today? Yeah, I know.
Hoping you'd pick me last or something because I've talked a lot. My final thought would be, when the lid comes off of China, there's going to be a whooshing sound of American institutional Christianity rushing in to tell the Chinese church what's right, what's wrong, how to fix itself, and make it look more like us. That would make me very, very sad if that happens. I think hopefully there'll be enough substance there that within China that they can resist that and still maybe find some of their own Christianity has evolved enough to where they can resist it and then maybe send some of it back, as the Koreans are already. I mean, the Koreans are kind of reaching out. And this one last thought, Paul, was you talking about the anxiety that your grandparents felt about the Methodists. These people, the Methodists were hunting after you. You were unsaved. They were hunting for your souls. They were trying to save you from Calvinism. I mean, that's, if you read the primary sources, that's how they felt towards each other. In the same way, just as Protestants and evangelicals flooded into Catholic Latin America, was to save the lost who were Catholic. And so
don't hunt Dutchmen. You just read a little bit about the Boer War. Those
they
Dutchmen
fight
are
back.
crafty. They're not a lot of them, but they're crafty, and they
they're
can
big.
You back them into a corner, they can be really something. So.
Yes. But that was my last thought.
All right, Ron, your thoughts. Sorry,
about
I didn't
the
get that
Dutchmen.
much, but take your time with it. I'd like to hear.
Their whole country of the Netherlands is underwater, and they made it work. They can deal with stuff. What I'm thinking about in this conversation is just how God grows us, which would be doctrinally would be sanctification, and Scripture calls us to work out our salvation with fear and trembling, because it's God who works to willing to work according to His good purpose. And what I'm thinking about as I hear us talking is there's a mixture, kind of a marbling of sanctified, godly stuff and carnal, selfish or self-absorbed stuff in me and in every one of us. And as I get older, I look back and realize that some of the things that I thought were completely good in my life or in my heart probably were mixed. I joke sometimes. I think my parents. I grew up in a home that was proud of its humility, and which I think touches on something that some of the things I really fear, or things I really hope for, and which criticisms I would take seriously and which ones I wouldn't. But it shaped me, and as I look at I've been a pastor for a long time. What about my career matters a lot to me, or what hasn't, and how I've looked at it. And some of that is really godly, genuinely wanting to pour my life out to make a difference for Christ. Some of that is sort of a bald, carnal defending of my own self perception or my reputation in other people and other circles. And those are tied into the exact same kinds of things. I say all that to say this about this conversation here today. I think the same is true not just for me individually or each of us individually, but for us as people groups in nations or however we self-identify. There are things that are really good about being a Dutch American follower of Jesus, or Chinese American, or whatever other, or Chinese or Canadian even. But there also are things that are pretty carnal, often woven right into that. And I hear this conversation today kind of touching on the intricacies or the slowness and subtleties of the sanctifying that God does in us. Because as we go along in life, we realize that some of the things that we thought were flat out white or flat out black in our lives were kind of marbled white and black, kind of gray, and some of them were kind of gray. And so that could be traits, that could be things that we're doctrinally sold out on, or it could be traits in our own personal lives and the way we've developed for following Jesus. Some of that is ethnic or tied to our national heritage. And some of those things are really good about being raised in a certain subculture. And other things maybe aren't quite so gospel as we might like to think. So I'm reflecting on that as I hear this conversation. Like, we're all in the process of being made new. And that being made new happens differently. And in part, it's different because of the background we each have. And that may be ethnic or due to any other characteristic. But I just hear all these different moving parts that God is working on in our lives and the lives of the people groups that we each belong to. And I think that's just amazing. And it's ultimately something to be celebrated.
All right. Well, Jason, I don't know what happened to him. He just sort of dropped. We'll see if he comes back. That moves you up, Caleb.
Uh-oh. Wasn't ready. This is kind of takeaways, I guess, or just closing statements, I guess.
Oh, both.
Both. Okay. It's difficult because it's a lot of what I hear. I'm glad. I'm very happy to hear your perspectives on these sorts of things, and I think, Ron, as much there is certainly a side of me that feels like I am overthinking things. It's like, thank God my family has always emphasized the fact that whether I'm American or Chinese, I think being Christian is the most important thing. So I may never get this question answered in my lifetime, but at least I have that. So it's funny. It's nearly a blasphemy to say at least I have Christ, right?
But we'll have a lot of time in the next life to figure this all out. So.
I guess so, or at least it won't matter. One or the other.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it. This has all been very helpful. I appreciate people kind of playing with the idea and hearing all your opinions.
Well, it's a super good topic. So, Daniel, what are your thoughts?
How can I close this? I guess I would say that to kind of maintain that the family ties and to keep the culture strong within a local church, Parents, don't be afraid to tell your children that you want them home, I guess, that you want them nearby. Don't be afraid to tell them that you want grandchildren and that you want to see them go to church. Don't be afraid to say, hey, it would be awesome if you joined the family business. I think that, be confident in the inheritance that you're giving your children. Yeah. Does that make sense? Like, Proverbs 22, a good man leaves an inheritance to his children. There's a rich spiritual inheritance that, at least in my family, I'm very, very blessed. Like, I have a wonderful family, but they have a rich spiritual inheritance. And sometimes I wish they were a little bit more confident in that inheritance, maybe a little bit more proud of it, or I don't know how to put that, but yeah.
Wow, that's this has been such an interesting conversation for me, because you do see the layering of the culture. The American culture has moved so quickly, and we've used these words before, a culture of sincerity, where you are praised for carrying on the tradition of the family, and then the culture of authenticity, which values the secret sacred self and almost fetishizes rebellion. If you carry on the family business, you've somehow betrayed the secret sacred self within you. And how dare you not move out of the town you grew up in? How dare you don't go to the church your parents went to? And these tensions have been in the Christian Reformed Church deeply. And the same-sex marriage fight that the Christian Reformed Church has had is all about this. Because, when you have Rita on the floor of Synod 2023 in tears, can my children be CRC? And then it's been interesting because the new conservative charge came from the millennial men, often from West Michigan. But also people who had come into the denomination, not of Dutch descent, saying, no, we want your Dutch theological heritage. We want to make that your own and our own. And so doubling down, and it's the boomers who grew up in the church of their parents, but also went through the counterculture that said, no, we've got to burn the wooden shoes. We've got to open this up.
And my pastor is Dr. Justin Carruthers. I mean, that's exactly who you're talking about.
Yeah, well, Justin used to be here in Central California, but he didn't pay enough attention to his emigration papers, and he got repatriated to Canada. I remember when his church came to classes and said, yeah, Justin should have paid more attention to his immigration lawyer, because of all things got, repatriated. So I don't think by Trump. So, but then he went to, and it has been thriving in Canada. So Justin, if you're watching, God bless you. But I mean, these issues are about as germane to, what we've been talking about in the TLC for a long time, and very germane to the whole woke right business. Sam, I'm going to leave you in the room. Jason just got back, and I'll give Jason the final word, and then I'll bring Sam into the room.
Yeah,
Jason, your thoughts?
Yeah, sorry I missed some of that. My home internet went down, so I think as I think about what Caleb talked about that God is the author of culture, and that he uses culture and countries as part of his common grace to just prevent us from being as bad as we possibly could. And he loves our culture and wants to redeem our culture. And he probably wants to love us completely as members of a culture. And there is no Greek, there is no Jew, there's no Scythian or barbarian. And so those two things are in tension. I think part of the tension is that our culture is probably partially marked by our sinful nature and total depravity, and God's word is not. But I guess as someone who left the fold and longs for it, I can't go back, and that's okay. But I think God does want to love you as a whole person, and as your whole culture. He wants to love and speak to and minister to. So that's my final thought.
All right. Thank you, Jason. I just want to thank everybody who showed up for the panel here. Appreciate you. Again, if you have questions about, well, how does Paul assemble these people for the Friday things? I do send a list to some. I always want to get some TLC stalwarts like Mark Parker in, because, you know, it helps sort of anchor. I'm not the only one who sort of knows the thing. But then also I put a link, usually Wednesday or Thursday, it's very short notice, in the membership messaging thing. And again, that's not terribly observable. And I put that in the membership section, and any member in there can respond to it. And I have a little, I'm thinking I'm going to Google Forms to sort of streamline this. I have to learn Google Forms to do some other things in my job. So, but I really appreciate all of you who have, you know, 2 guys came out of the lurk this week. Jason, let's see, who was it? Dan notes that, you know, Jason's new. So it's always great having people come out of the lurk and come onto the screen for the first time, so we can see your face and get to know you a little bit. That's a hugely important piece of the corner that we want to keep inviting people, you know, not just into the conversation in the chat or on a Discord server, but even into the conversation on the screens, because, you know, and everybody comes with a different story. And Caleb, I loved your pitch today, and I loved all. I had a ton of great pitches today, but I think you're really putting your finger on so much of what's going on in this, you know, Christian moment right now at so many deep levels. And oh shoot, we lost Sam. He was walking around outside. So yeah. So anybody who wants to come in, I pinned the link. If people don't come in, then I'll probably wrap things up fairly quickly. Otherwise, we'll just continue the conversation until, I don't know. We'll see if someone comes in.
Can I read Revelation 7:9 really quick?
Yes.
It kind of fits the closing. It was after this I looked, and behold, a great multitude that no one could number, from every nation, from all tribes and peoples and languages, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes, with palm branches in their hands. They come with their they come as they were, right? And they come with their culture and their languages, and their identities are somehow intact in the new kingdom.
Yeah. So I was thinking about Caleb, when you're talking about the age to come, I was thinking, you know, part of what the banquet of the patriarchs, the banquet of the Lamb, is Isaiah 60, where Richard Mall wrote a really good book on it, about this passage where the kings of the earth, all the cultures of the earth, bring in their riches into the kingdom. And, you know, we're seeing that, but that's a difficult negotiation that we're always making, and sorting this out. And so I think when the lid comes off China and we see this Chinese indigenous church, Mark, I don't think you have anything to worry about. If a bunch of Americans come in there and start acting like they're going to tell these people what to do, ain't going to happen. Just like, you know, Americans.
They'll try, though.
Oh,
yeah, they'll try.
Of course, we Americans, we always try this. But I don't
remind you that China is one of the few uncolonized Asian countries. So
that's right.
Never been colonized.
Very good point. Very good point.
Just the rumblings I hear from China is that China, not unlike Korea, basically is like, at some point, we're going to show the world how Christianity is really done. And I thought, oh, yeah, you'll join the rest of us colonizers. But that kind of energy isn't bad in itself. It's exactly that confidence that Daniel is talking about. And that crisis of confidence, I think, has been huge in the CRC, and why this younger, confident generation coming up and saying, step back, we'll show you how it's done. It's like, all right, there's something good with that lion energy. So go ahead, Sam.
Hi there, Paul, and thanks everyone for contributing today. It's great to hear from some new faces, Jason and Caleb. We really appreciated it. I'm just thinking of the phrase, well, the cliche, if you will, you can't go home again, which I mean, I think captures a lot of this conversation, which is we both all long for a home, but at the same time, we're both all very modern creatures. And like, I think I've heard people say this phrase, so the nuclear family, it's a heresy, which I don't know, maybe it's definitely not, heretical in the sense that it violates any specific teaching, but maybe it's against the orthopraxy of the traditional church. But I think of that and I think like, well, I don't know. I'm not volunteering to have my mother-in-law live with me though, or my father-in-law, right? So I mean, at the same time, we all, but there's a point there, which is that we all like to rage against the machine, but we're all very much trapped in it too, and we all very much like a lot of the trappings of modernity. And yeah. And I'll also, before I get off here, give a quick plug for the Ross Dothek conversation. It helped me understand the logic of people who think that AI is going to take over everything, which is basically, as I understand it, is that programming is a hard problem. And they're close on that. And if they get to that, everything else is kind of the easy problem, which I don't know if I buy into that exactly, but it helped me understand that kind of thinking a lot. And I definitely would encourage everyone here to watch it.
All right. Thanks, Sam.
Just really quick, in response to Sam about multi-generational households, it would help solve the housing crisis if we had more multi-generational, and as well as help prevent or forestall dementia in the elderly, since it seems like social engagement is a huge factor on how fast that accelerates in a person's life. So there are multiple benefits to bringing old people in to live with their children.
I think that said, I mean, you have like those apartments in that they have in various places. I've heard of at least the only real anecdotal one I heard about is like in Vietnam, but it's in all kinds of places where it's like, oh yeah, you'll have like one, maybe a 2-room apartment, and you got like one whole family inside of it, extended family inside of it, or maybe even multiple families inside of it. It's like everybody sleeps on the floor, you know, that kind of thing.
We need to Americanize it a little bit, you know.
Well, then what's
square feet, you know?
So I grew up on the East Coast, American East Coast, mostly in sort of a white-black context. White African American. That was sort of the big conversation when I grew up. And I move out to California, and it's like, you know, Hispanic, Pacific Islanders, and then you just look at Chinese, Korean, Hmong, Vietnamese. Hmong Vietnamese, not the same thing. Korean Chinese, Japanese, definitely not the same thing. A lot of bitter blood. But again, what you said about Confucian is so true, Caleb. These collective family units that, I mean, I used to think Dutch families are tight, and then it's like meeting these Asian populations. They're like, oh no,
Do you worship your ancestors?
Exactly. Oh, we do, but only like Kuiper and Bavinck. Only a few of them.
Only great men. That's right.
That's right. Oh, San Antonio Sartori, welcome.
Well, that's. I mean, I don't. Only if it says that he's not here right now. So
okay,
you know, you must not confuse.
We've gone full IFS.
Everything's been labeled under the branding of Sartori Studios now. So now I have a job there with those guys, and I can just do the things I used to do. So,
are you the first LLC in the corner now? Have you trademarked that?
No, but I don't think I need to, really.
All right, I think Michael Sartori, former worship leader, pastor, Reformed but not Dutch Reformed. What say you?
Well, like what I was really, thought Mark was hitting the nail on the head just with the whole, yes, like the disastrous qualities of the whole history of evangelicalism, but then at the same time, or what he was, him saying like, it is still like the infrastructure that actually like works in the world. And so the issue is, how does the evangelical church make use of these other resources? And and it's a weird thing, 'cause it's like, the evangelical church failed me in many ways, but then that is my heritage now, and so it's like I can't, and I so like I'm deeply offended just at the thought of like I could just go to a different denomination or a different tradition that suits me better, like, because like that's going against the whole like point of the thing of having a deep multi-generational culture. And then I also think of like, well, maybe there's the young Michael Sartori's in the church there, and if I stay, maybe I can make them find their way through the whole thing a little bit easier. But I think that all those ethnic elements, like those are all part of the tradition. Like, hey, Stephen, I think of between myself and my wife, like our kids, they have Jewish roots, they have Greek roots, they have German roots, Italian roots, and like all of those different traditions are all a part of their story. But at the same time, there was really important reasons why our grandparents, great grandparents walked away from those traditions and ended up in the evangelical church, because they weren't always functioning the way that everybody looks back with starry eyes at. But if we go back to tradition, it's like, no, people abandoned those traditions pretty quick for a whole lot of reasons. So I mean, it's probably better when people go back now, because but they're doing it in the manner of pro-felicity, I guess you could say. So there's some thoughts.
No, that's right. That's right. And I mean, Ron and I lived through, and that's did Mark, anybody our age, we lived through the abandoning in the Christian Reformed Church. The tradition of the Christian Reformed Church was intentionally dismantled. It really was. We had the worship wars. I mean, Ron and I both grew up heavy Sabbatarian influences. That was decried as legalism, should be abandoned. You can go, I think, is Russ's still closed on Sundays, Ron?
I'm not sure.
Because he's not looking for a place to eat on Sundays. And,
how revolutionary would it be, guys, if Christians stopped going to restaurants after church on Sunday? What statement would that make? Both positive and shocking, because it would be a negative. I mean, the restaurant industry would be up in arms, but I mean, I'm starting to wonder if we should go back to that.
Well, I was just watching a video on, Japanese depopulation. And so one of the women who's a leader in that movement, she's recommending Japanese people leave the cities. Japan is urbanized at like a 90% rate. People leave the cities, go back to the village. And I thought, if America really wanted to, because they're just talking about the tyranny of the job, what if we went back to blue laws, which I grew up with in New Jersey? Blue laws were basically stores, restaurants, anything that's non-essential, close it on Sunday. Bring back the Protestant Sabbath. And I mean, the culture would change.
Well, we'd have to voluntarily do it first before we impose it on the wider culture, because Americans are allergic to being told what to do.
Right.
Yeah, unless there's a majority of the people that want that. They want the minority of the population to be told what to do. That's also true in America. But so anyway, we've got Corner Citizen. What say you, Alan?
Hey everybody, good to be back. Yeah, this is a mixture of this talk conversation and something, Paul said earlier. I got my axe to grind with Paul out of love. Paul was
Grinding
talking
in love.
yeah, with love, as iron sharpens iron, someone wrote that down one time. The first point is with like enforcement of rules within church, and how Paul's pointed out very rightly that you basically can't do that, because if you were ever gonna, if anyone was gonna ever enforce a rule, they would just leave. I would say at my church, which was very small at the time, probably 40, 50 people regularly attending, there was church discipline for someone. And when he was told he would be brought in front of the whole congregation and disciplined and, told what he did, he left, right? And exactly what you said. But you know what all the women said is, oh, well, I'm really glad our pastor did that because it made us feel safe. And so this idea of like, well, we can't easily enforce the standards, so there are no standards. It really has this immense downstream consequence. And I think in a lot of these conversations, we don't look at the upstream causes of what's happening downstream. Like even in this conversation, it's like not eating after church. It's like, well, who's going to cook? It's like, well, everyone works a job. Everyone works a 9 to 5. Everyone commutes in and out. Your whole day, 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. is accounted for. Like there is no big dining room. You don't use it. You're lucky to eat around a small table. So who's going to feed the 10 people that come to your house? So it's like, I'm not saying we can account for everything, and like maybe people can figure out ways, but that church discipline one of like, we need to actually create structures, and there are going to be consequences for not enforcing these things. It's like, yeah, no one takes the pastor seriously because he never enforces anything. It's like everybody respected our pastor for being like, okay, he stood up and he showed us what it looks like. He was fair. He said he was just going to stand him up in front of everyone in the congregation, say what he did, make it communally known. It had been reported 1-on-1, then 2-on-1, then to the congregation. This is how the standards are enforced. And then everyone's like, okay, you got to fly right. You can't just, be drunk at an event. You can't just harass girls, whatever it is, whatever it is. And at the same time, we also had a mega church that collapsed while I was here in New York City. And a lot of those people said, oh, we never felt safe at that church. We loved the worship, but we never felt safe. It's like, well, so it's like, it doesn't boggle my mind of like why there are no pillars, because no one's in, there's no foundation. No one's actually like, so I think there was a lot of benefit in my mind from like there being a foundation point. And I think that's what Pajot talks a lot around of like the cross, in all the symbolism, there's a foundation point. The cross is like the thing from which all things flow. In a lot of the imagery, or Christ at the center of the Last Supper, all this imagery of like, who's the center point? Who are you rallying around? Who's your banner? And even if it's going to be slower, like ineffectual or not in the same way as it was done in the past, having those center points, having this, like, this is where we make our stand, even if it kills us, is like very valuable for creating structures that last.
It's interesting in the CRC that, again, the generation before mine, I heard a story once where a young woman is pregnant out of wedlock. She's a member of the CRC, and she misses church, because if you would miss church, the elders would come to your house and say, why are you missing church? You're not availing yourself of the means of grace. If you start skipping church, discipline will start the process of discipline on you. The mother quickly goes outside to meet the elders coming to the house and said, we've joined the RCA. And that then, got them all off the back. And this goes back to Rod Hare's point about church as voluntary organization. And this then goes down to the question of a state church, where, as Mark was talking about, one of the amazing things when you read church history closely, and especially the history of the papacy, one of the things that happens after the Second World War is that freedom of religion sort of pervades the Western countries. And so then all these concordats that the papacy had signed with different monarchs and governments all sort of collapse, because all the concordats were that the monarchs wanted a hand and wanted a say in the naming of bishops. They didn't want the church naming bishops that the monarch didn't like. And so they had all these treaties about how they would name bishops in a local area. Now, on one hand, that says, wow, those bishops had real power, that the government was cared about it. In the United States, you name a bishop or a pastor of a local church, is the mayor sitting there wringing his hands? Maybe in a really small town, Not in Sacramento. It's like, yeah, church, go do what you want. We don't really care what you do because not going to affect us.
It might just if I could. Yeah, please. Sorry.
Can I say something about the church discipline thing? My sister Jill was a boomer, and at a hootenanny, a young boy asked her to dance, and she had the misfortune of saying yes, and then the dominie called her out in the middle of catechism class, and that is just an ongoing family story. My mom went to talk to her father about it, and so on and so forth, and it's the scandal of how repressive the Dutch Reformed Church was.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I know like one person that got a divorce when I grew up. And you look at our homes now where 70% of children are growing up in a broken home. And you're like, yeah, that was a crappy thing to happen to my sister Jill. But when you strip all that stuff away, that's some pretty crappy stuff too.
Yeah, and can I I know I spoke a lot, but just to jump on Jason's point, that's a great story. Hootenanny gone wrong, but the yeah, people say like, oh, we can complain. The CRC did something wrong. Oh, PCUSA did. Oh, we don't stand for it. We complain against it. Well, no one complains like, oh, well, there's a single mother down the street. Okay, well, like, she can't complain to anybody. She can't. Everyone's just gonna say, well, that's your fault. So it's like there's this imbalance or asymmetry of like, oh, well, I was forced to do this. I was blah blah blah, and like how repressive all these institutions are versus like, okay, fine, we'll get rid of all the institutions, and now there's no one to complain to, and now all these marriages fall apart, and it's like, so like this idea of like, well, everyone's complaining, so we'll just get rid of all the things people are complaining about is like, well, that's more of like an asymmetry and an unfairness, and like it's so obvious to me, like in my mind of like, yeah, I don't care if someone complains, leave, fine, leave. But a lot of the people are happy that there's church discipline at least in my small way at my church. A lot of people are happy that there's structure and order.
That happens when you fire people. So I've had to do that a fair amount. That sometimes out of the woodwork comes the people who are very happy that you did that. Yeah. We weren't going to say anything when the person was still an employee, but once they left, was like, we were working our butts off and this guy wasn't doing anything. How fair is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Jess. It's Jess.
What's up, Paul? Thanks for having me on. It was good. It was good listening to you guys. I didn't catch all of it, but it kind of coincided. What's that?
How dare you? What's the thing? Everybody wants enforcement here. We start at 10 o'clock, don't you?
All right.
Every
Crack
Friday.
the whip, PBK. Crack the whip.
Come on.
Now you gotta go back and listen to it at 2 times speed.
Jacob is finally going to get the PBK we deserve.
Yeah, I'm sure that'll go over well. Disciplining over the internet. I don't even know how you'd even do that. But some of it was coinciding with some personal reflection I've been doing that is sort of there's two big events going on in my life. My parents are getting older, and my oldest son is graduating high school, and so been thinking about culture and tradition, and then I've been talking with Yosef over the past week, kind of about my own experience, but also just reflecting on these things in general. And he's really interested in sort of what's the multi-generational staying power of whatever it is, evangelicalism or this little corner or whatever. But I just want to share with you guys something. So like I grew up, my parents became Christians when I was like 8, and then they became missionaries when I was 13. And so my teenage years were spent doing missions work with, my parents were involved with a non-denominational evangelical missions organization called YWAM. And they basically just got back from probably their last mission trip overseas because they're getting older, and my dad's got on early stages of Parkinson's, and traveling's a lot harder. You know, they're in their 70s, and so this is like the end of an age. And then I had my I thought I was going to be a missionary. If you get, some of you may know my story, but God called me out of that when I was about 22, 23. I'd spent 23. So I spent about 5 years doing missions work, thinking that's what I was going to do for the rest of my life. God called me out of it. And so and that's what I've been talking with Joseph about a lot this week. So it's kind of fresh on my mind, stirring around, and what, like, I was at a YWAM base that was very, very focused on culture, about spreading the gospel, about trying to distinguish between what is, you know, Western cultural values, and then when we're bringing the gospel, because we were going to Asia, we were going to North Africa, we were going into areas that are not Western at all. And then how do you present the gospel without, you know, just disseminating just general Western stuff? And well, I mean, the answer is it's kind of impossible. But for me personally, like, even at the time, like, it started setting off questions like, I don't even, like, what is my culture? Here I am concerned about what these other people's culture are, this tribe in Thailand, or, you know, in the mountains in Nepal, but what is my culture? And really, this is like a, you know, I felt like, does my Christianity have my cultural expression? You know, here I am, you know, I'm 19, I like punk rock music, and, you know, then I go to a church service and I'm like, how does this, you know, is even punk rock, listening to punk rock music, a part of my culture? Is that it, or is it more of, anyway? So, like, I had all those questions going on in my mind, and then well, I've been just reflecting on that, and then we were also hyper concerned as a mission agency, just with that cultural question of, like, when we bring the gospel, let's bring the pure gospel, make sure that they have the opportunity to have a cultural expression of it. And, you know, like, with all the efforts we did, like, I remember going into, like, churches in India, and they're just singing a Hindi translation of "Shine Jesus Shine" or whatever it was. and it, you know, and they're up there, guitar, bass, drums, and you're just like, you know, you can't, I don't know what to do. Like, this is
It's funny actually, because when I was in my Chinese church, like I mentioned, I was growing up. Actually, there's a certain part of me where I listen to certain kinds of like songs from either England or even Scotland and Ireland. My brain will mistake them for Chinese music because when I was growing up, we would just sing Chinese translations of old hymns.
Right.
Like, and even when I went to China, I went to a church there. It was a Three Self church, I think, and they were singing "Leaning on the Everlasting Arms" in Chinese. It was it was quite something to behold.
Yeah, we have a Korean language church that meets in our building right after our service, and all their songs are just sort of translated into Korean. They're all, you know, the evangelical hits. So anyway, just to wrap this up, but then my son's graduating, and he's going to go do a school with YWAM in the fall. And
does that trigger you?
You know, like, it feels like it's significant, and it's also like, what's happening? Why is he doing that? And then my parents are encouraged by that, but they're like, missions is ending. Mine was like, I don't know. It was deeply influential on me. Like, it was all a positive experience, but it wasn't the thing that I ended up doing for a living for the last 20 years. And then now my son is, you know, at least going to go do this in the fall. And, you know, and just thinking about all the things you guys were talking about, just wanted to share that. I don't even have a great point. That was it.
Well, I think the globalization point is helpful because
So what happens with global? I mean, you have to understand the Peterson phenomena in light of globalization, because there was sort of an anti-colonial wave that goes through the culture, says, oh, all this cultural appropriation, that has to stop. And many of the things that we've seen in the culture were anticipated 10, 15, 20 years ahead of time with Protestant missionary movements, because Protestant missionaries were working on this stuff because these were concerns. Rice Christians, I remember reading missionary books from the turn of the 19th to the 20th century, really focusing on these issues. And they really helped me when I was in the DR trying to think through these issues. So, and it sort of sets up the, Matt had these great, has this great story here where he says, some South African friends taught me a traditional dance from them homeland. It was the electric slide. And then suddenly they wondered, how did I know their dance? Part of the reason that Peterson was so electric when he first came on with his Jungian archetypes was that Jung made the observation that this also gets to Michael's point about transposition with C.S. Lewis. There's a limited range of things in the world, and that they don't all necessarily correspond one thing to another, because your body is limited. This also is connected with combinatorial explosives. So you're going to see these patterns all around the world, and they're going to be slightly different and idiosyncratic, but they'll also be patterned. And part of what now 500 years into globalization is we're wrestling with the fact that, these Dutch patterns aren't disconnected from the German patterns or the French patterns. And then you go to a household. I was just bosses in the comments. I go to Boss's house and we have Chinese / Thai food in the Netherlands. But it's also Indonesian. And I remember when one of my Dutch CRC friends is going to cook for us, he cooks nasi goreng, which is this Indonesian dish, which the Dutchmen really enjoyed. And growing up, there was a guy in our CRC church, which is mostly to African Americans, whose background, his name was Max. He was Indonesian in terms of the background. And it wasn't until much later it was like, oh, that's why he was in our church. So globalization has happened, and so it sort of feeds this tension between this Platonic tension between Christianity as a form free from particularities, and then there is no Christianity without the particularities of an actual life. And, again, the missionaries were thinking, we need to give them the pure gospel, untainted from culture. And it's like, when Jesus was incarnate, you cannot be a human being without a culture. So is Second Temple Judaism the culture of God? Is Hebrew the language of God? But all true CRC people know that it's actually Dutch or maybe Frisian.
Yeah, I have a friend, you might enjoy this story. Him and his wife, they went to China for a while, but then they ended up going to India. And they were long-term committed to, they were like, we're going to do this for the rest of our lives. We're in it long-term. They'd spent years and years and years overseas, like very dedicated people, great people. And he goes to India and he's teaching a discipleship class for Indian believers. And so he did, when he told me the story, he's like, I didn't really know what to do. So he's teaching out of the book A Purpose-Driven Life for the one aspect of the discipleship course. So he's teaching these Indian believers, and then after class he's asking them where they go to church and where they're attending, and one of them says he goes to an Indian Orthodox church, and he's like, what is that? What's an Indian Orthodox church? He's like, well, like, traditionally I'm Christian, there's Indian Hindus, but we're Christian Hindus. He's like, I know that, but like, where does that come from? He's like, well, from the Apostle Thomas. and he said this blew his mind. He was like, and he had been in search of this Platonic form of the gospel, because he's like, because he was in the same part of the mission that I was, we were hyper focused on this question of culture and the gospel and how do they interplay and stuff. And like what Mark read about in Revelation, like every nation's represented there. So they must have distinction. But so anyway, this sends him on a path, and he is now an Orthodox priest in Colorado. And this was before Orthodoxy was cool.
Oh, you just warmed so many hearts, Jess. So many ortho bros are like, oh, the true path, the true path.
Welcome home. That's what they always say in the comments. Welcome home.
But what Bas van Os is pointing to, another great Dutch name, is that exactly what I'm wrestling with my sermon on Acts 15. Right there at the beginning in the book of Acts, the first church fight was, the first persecution in Jerusalem was against the Hellenistic Jews, the diaspora Jews. The apostles stay in Jerusalem, they get kicked out. And then, of course, Paul, but all of those issues are right there. And, in many ways, what's amazing is that we continue to talk about them in the corner. I mean, you got Father Stephen DeYoung in Jacob's Corner, and it's like, it's just the first century all over again.
If I could just make a quick point, I will say that if we're talking about, we can't have, like everything's fungible, everything's transferable, everything is substitutionary. Like if I don't like chunky peanut butter, if I don't like Skippy, I can get Peter Pan. If I don't get Peter Pan, it's all the same. I don't think we can laugh at Orthodox for saying, well, this is the rock that we're going to like. No, we have something we are not the substitutionary good. You can't just like go across the street and go to any other church at a strip mall and also say you're part of the one true church. It's like, if that, what's the difference between, like if you have nothing, that anyone can get anything from anywhere. Of course, there's going to be a backlash by saying like, no, this is the place, this is the thing, this is the history. So I don't think we can have it both ways of like, everything's fungible. You can walk across the street to the next church and then the next church and the next church and then laugh at people when they're like, no, this is the church. You can walk away from it, but you can't say you have the same thing somewhere else.
Yep.
Yeah. And, this is why I'm a Calvinist. Because God knows his own. And I'm not sure we have much of a clue. Calvinism is the tradition of the ultimate skeptic. Sorry. Just saying.
Well, yeah, the thing I wanted to bring up earlier, because I realized like the thing that bridges that a lot of those gaps between like the cultures and things like that is marriage. And then even, so just to plug the book, but like one of the central themes I really explored, because I was trying to discover the answer to this question. And, it's like we celebrate the Lord's Supper that's deeply tied to Passover. And that's a feast that's for the people that are in the community. But then there's so much significance in the Feast of Tabernacles, and it has eschatological significance. And that's the feast where you invite in the widows and the strangers and the people that are not yet part of your community. And and it's a big feast. So it's like, hey, they're going to bring their ethnic dish to the party and you're going to try it out and find out that it's actually pretty tasty and whatever. And it's also a feast, even today in Jewish culture, it's a time when a lot of weddings take place. And that's that's the reason why the reason why my wife's mother has a Greek last name, but was not Greek Orthodox, is their grandfather fell in love with a Jewish girl and neither of them could decide who should convert, so they went to the Baptist church instead. So and those are the metaphors too those are the universals too, is those family metaphors of wedding, marriage, Christ and his bride, or even when people were kind of talking about these orders of love and like we need to love the stranger more than that. Well, it's like, okay, is there God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten son. If there's nothing unique and special about the love of father and son, what's the point of putting that in that verse? Like, so those are the things that are present in every culture and are universal symbols that point us to the greater realities of our unity in Christ.
All right, I'm going to close the stream in 10 minutes. So if you want to get in here, you better get in here soon. If there's something you're sitting on that you want to say, better get it out of your mouth. Maybe I'll close the stream
Real
now.
quick, just to back up what Corner Citizen was talking about with church discipline. And I was telling you about, the nightmare that's my local church. We have an elder that was really had engaged in some serious misconduct, divisive, mean, etc. The pastor tried to sideline him. First, they tried. He didn't know how to count votes. He's not very good at politics, so he tried to get him removed from the board, which split the board right down the middle. So the guy got retained. So he got kept on. He maintained his position as elder because it was a 4-4 vote. And then the next week, he tried to start a new Sunday school class with that was going to replace him. He said it's just going to be sidelined. He just plowed ahead with his. He just plowed right through him with his Sunday school class, and basically again, his half of his class just rose up in rebellion, and including the pastor's mother-in-law against him, and just rolled right over him. Now this is the setting, the context. When I said shit show, I meant shit show. You guys were talking about muck. I'm talking authentic shit.
You click on that term, this picture is what comes up.
Exactly, my church. We're going into a board meeting that's the setting. And my attitude is, hey, you got a 4-4 vote. Bylaws say that, they can overrule you with a majority vote, but they can't remove you without a 2/3 vote, which they don't have. And they can't. So any motion. So I said my position is very raw politics at this point, is just act as if you have the authority based on scripture and based on the bylaws. Just make decisions, force objections, which will be defeated at the board meeting, and basically turn up the heat and see who can't stay in the kitchen longest, or who leaves first. And the problem with us is that my side is our clock is ticking. It's a very limited window because we've got people with health issues, and so in 6 months, that position is that tenuous political advantage will slip against us. But if you don't, this is just whatever. That I'm just saying the ability to enforce the American Christian culture, evangelical culture in America is allergic to authority. They like to bully culturally. If they have a big, they'll bully people. They'll find a minority to scapegoat and persecute, but they themselves resist authority.
Yeah,
they just don't like it.
I agree. I just think that that's also going to have its own consequences. Like, that's just as much a decision as the other decision. The decision to enforce things is the same as it's also a decision that's symmetrical to not enforcing things. So it just frustrates me when it's like, oh, if we all just don't do anything, then we bear no responsibility, and no one can come to us and say, if a pastor goes to someone and says, hey, I don't like the way you're treating your wife. Oh, well, suddenly the pastor can be held responsible. They got a divorce and they shouldn't have gotten a divorce. And the pastor, how dare you? Versus if the pastor's like, oh, one of my congregants is beating the shit out of his wife. Well, not my problem. It's just like, that's like, there's an asymmetry there where it's like, one is like, well, the pastor's at fault and he should be blamed. And then, oh, well, if something really bad happens and no one steps up, well, none of us are at fault because not doing something isn't a choice. It's like, no, not doing something is also a choice. and we're seeing a lot of the consequences of a lot of not doing things.
Well, wouldn't you say it takes faith then? I mean, that's where faith comes in, right? You act and you got to have faith enough to be willing to lose it all, right? I mean,
Yeah, that initial foundation of responsibility or care, or like, this is something I should or shouldn't do, that is like, yeah, I think like comes along with your faith. But I just see a lot of people being like, well, it didn't work out in 1960. It's like, it didn't work out in the entire country because there's a giant groundswell of like social movement. So it's like, but now we're watching the rebound of like, why are a bunch of like 19-year-old boys being like, I will never, ever, ever, sleep in ever again because Jocko Willing told me not to, or this Orthodox pastor told me not to, Jay Dyer told me not to. It's like, yeah, because they want order and structure, and they're tired of being told, well, like, oh, I can't mentor you, I can't help you, I can't tell you anything. You know better, you know as well as I do. You're 15 years old. It's like, that world sucks, and they don't want to live in that anymore. And so, I mean, whatever. I don't know. That, the whole like, well, hey, it's very,
I think. Oh, sorry.
No, continue. Sorry.
Good, Caleb. Then we got to hear from Nathan.
I'll be quick. I think I think Paul, you mentioned this a while back. The real problem isn't just that there's no authority and people can do whatever they want. I think the other problem is that there are still expectations often. So people will expect something from somebody. What is it? Oh, you will still expect somebody to act in or a certain way or do a certain thing, but you will want to do it, which in some ways is the best reason to do anything, but in another sense, it's like it's really difficult to force yourself to first. If it's something really really difficult, it's difficult to force yourself to want to do it first and then do it. So it's almost better to just have like, okay, I'll do it because somebody told me to, I guess, and then it's like at least we get it done.
I made a video a couple of weeks ago on authority. I was making some videos about authority. Authority is a very interesting thing, and it's sort of a pass-through thing. Authority can only be mediated, and Nate had said, authority and power can be if it feels like it isn't true authority, then it's just a power move. And it'll be interpreted that way often, but it's authority is really all about alignment between heaven and earth. Anyway, go ahead, Nathan. What do you have to say? Again, I got 4 minutes before I close the stream.
I was going to say about your woke right thing. Just obviously, I've not watched it yet, but I would be interested to see how it lines up with my ways of thinking about these things, because my view is that the woke was never really like a movement of any kind, right? As in, it was more a term of abuse that a certain sect of people come up with. And then what they did was they just kind of used it for anyone they didn't like or who disagreed with them, but it never really was a unified political movement of any kind. And then what I think is happening now when people are saying, it was like a boogeyman, right? It was like the bad guys, they're the woke. Who are the woke? They're the baddies. And then, when it comes to now, I think when people are saying, oh, ironically, you've become like the woke, well, really all people are saying there again is you're now in the bad guy group, the ones I don't like. But there's no like content to it in terms of, what. In fact, oftentimes the people really shutting down debate are the ones who are claiming that, there's this big woke problem, right? They're not talking to people who disagree. They're like, why won't they ever talk to me? It's like, it's because you only ever go on right-wing podcasts and talk to people who agree. So that's my only take on the woke right thing, is that, whether or not it's even a real thing of any, in any sense, might be up for grabs. But I'll watch
All right. The woke right thing. Yeah. Watch the video. You're not the first person to comment on a video before ever watching it. I know that. And that's why title and thumbnail are vitally important, because most people don't get beyond that. If you look at the YouTube analytics, and you know this, Nathan, it's like the drop off of the first 30 seconds of a video. It's like, whoosh, and then some people stay. All right. Last thoughts. We got 2 minutes. Anybody want a last thought out there?
I want to get you a collar. Jacob bought you a collar. I want to get you one of these collars.
Oh.
Because look at how handsome you are. Look at you're magnificent. You're magnificent. And we'll start a new series, Better Call Paul. That's my pitch. Maybe we'll do a special series on, and it'll be a collaboration between our channels, a super series in the TLC. Better Call Paul.
Better Call Paul. All right.
That's it.
Real quick. Before you asked me earlier, I forgot to ask you back.
Well, you cut out. Go ahead, say it again, Caleb.
Oh, Jason, what style of banjo do you play?
So I actually basically don't play the banjo. I play guitar and mandolin in a bluegrass band, and that was gifted to me, and I need to grow my fingernails out to play it clawhammer.
You can do it with short nails. You can do it. I believe in you.
All right, the banjo. Any other last comments? We've got 1 minute before the branding starts. Thank you, Daniel and Jason, again for coming out of the lurk and being brave enough to come on screen and share something of your story. I really appreciate it.
Can I say something about the Chinese crayon color experiment?
Yes.
So if you give American kids a choice to pick a crayon, and they pick a crayon, and then you tell them their mom picked this other color for them, they go, well, I like this color that I chose. And with Chinese kids, if you tell them your mom picked this color for you, they put down theirs and they're like, I like this one best. And that's going to be a problem with those like Corner Citizen and myself and others who want to see a return of authority, is that we really like our crayon best. And it's very antithetical to us to go, yeah, I like the pastor's crayon best. That's the one I prefer.
But the mom picked such a good color, you know?
It is very true.
Well,
it is very true.
It's so true.
All right. Well, I will close this stream hearing from the Calvinist, and then there'll be another 10 or 15 minutes of branding if anyone cares to hear. But thank you all for showing up, and have what's left of your pleasant Friday.
Thanks.
What is this? Long before San Antonio Sartori was formed within his mother's womb, his destruction was predestined. A vessel of wrath created for destruction shall meet its fate in a collision with the vessel of God's holy vengeance. By sovereign decree, the Calvinist will meet your fate.
Your mom and
Reggie are on the top of the world.
I had an idea.
What?
Why don't you tell the fans out there that are watching in Michigan, watching in Sacramento, all over the colony?
Don't forget the ones in Ontario, Canada.
Ontario,
Some
Canada.
of our favorite fans are out
So
there.
we love Canada. Canada. Oh, Canada, the stars are greatly smiling. Jesus loves you, Canada. All right, now I'm going to do a little dance.
This is a first. We've never had a dance. So here it is.
I think you got to lift it up.
You think so? I think we see it pretty well.
We don't have no music though.
We don't have any music.
Okay.
I don't know what you're going to do now, Fred.
I'm just going to bust one.
Okay. You're sure you want me to put this up on YouTube?
Yep. Ain't nothing but a G thing, baby. 916, Jesus Christ is lady. He's the man in command, don't you see me? Because Jesus Christ took me away from sin and mercy. Rock the mercy. I love you, Jesus Christ, in every way you come. We three kings of Orient are. Travel gifts, we travel afar. Fields and fountains, lords and mountains, following yonder star. Peace out. We gotta do it together.
All right, here we go.
Thank you. Peace out. Hi, CJ.
Also in today's community report, Clara, our resident sociologist, had some relevant things to say to the world.
So this is my kitchen. You can even see that there is a fly trap behind me. That's something I would have removed if I had really thought about this, because that is disgusting. Right now I am roasting chicken to eat later today, and I feel like I need to justify that to myself and to the world, like literally to the world, because I'm live streaming.
Still I have it. There are moments I conveniently forget that I'm a 40-year-old man. The last vestiges of a ghost long dead. The ghost with a messiah complex. A messiah too lazy to rise or ascend. Happily hurt and hard. A hanger-on or haunting of a time past. A heroic dream of the harrowing of hell. Failure to launch. Cling to a life vest, treading in spells that linger and last. Mom and Dad, righteous and mad, daydreamers with ghosts of their own. My memory of them stoic, looking with aims to pretend. Always on the brink of somewhere. Each a child dancing on the fence. On down the river, dreamt in the sunshine. Saturday morning cartoons, the only Sabbath I knew. A disciple of Jim Henson and John Hughes. Worship in cathedrals where the Toys R Us, baptized in ball pits, a clown served the sacrament we eat. More Pepsi and Pizza Hut, say please. Say cheese. Between Kurt Cobain, a scrambled cable screen, towers tumbling, Super Bowls, and reality TV, the ghost is constitutionally unwilling and intrinsically unable to see and be seen, searching madly for attention to seek. But you could be anything. Never say never. If you've got nothing nice to say, don't say nothing. Ever. Don't talk to strangers. See what I say. Just do it. You don't listen very well, do you? You don't do very well, do you? You're not looking too good, are you? Keep up. Appearances aren't what they seem. Will you ever grow up? You look like you're stuck. I think you took too much. Echoes the ghost within the host, who prays the dead bury their dead and stay buried in a fading dream.
Where are you here?
Oh, there I am. Hey.
Where are you? Where?
Got me?
Oh boy. Yeah. Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me.
Come on, man.
Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. All that long is Jesus' journey. Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. Yeah.
Walk with my mama.
Yeah, walk with my mama.
Walk with me.
walk with me too.
You walk with my mama.
Yeah.
Walk with me.
And walk with me too.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jesus journey.
I want Jesus.
Want Jesus.
Walk with me.
Walk with me. Hold my hand, Lord. Hold my hand. Hold my hand, Lord. Hold my hand. All along this Jesus journey. Hold my hand, Lord. And hold my hand. Walk with me. You walk with Moses.
Walk with me.
Walk with me.
You walk with Moses. Walk with me.
Walk with me.
While I'm home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jesus journey.
I want Jesus.
I want Jesus to walk with me.
Say, walk with me, Lord. How y'all doing?
Walk with me. Walk with me,
Lord. Walk with me.
Walk with me.
I'm on my
Yeah, Lord.
I want Jesus.
I want Jesus
to walk with me.
To walk with me. Walk with David, a little shepherd boy. Yeah, you made him a great king. I know David shouted for joy. You walked with David, and he's a little shepherd boy. You made him a great king. And David shouted for joy.
That's right.
Oh, yeah. So walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. All along this Jesus journey. Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. You gotta walk with me, Lord.
Yeah! That was rocking great, brother.
Oh, yeah.